Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there, and you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Over here, it's good. I'm having... on the farm, like I said the last time, we're going into the rainy season, and since I've got all my new 100+ Logan and mango trees, I'm in farmer mode, so now I understand how important the rain is. And before it was like, oh my god, it's gonna rain, and now it's like, first thing I do when I get up is look at the weather report and see what the percentage is of rain, because now in June, July, I'm almost at a year, so I've got saplings out there. And believe me, folks, I paid, a lot of work and money has gone into these things, and the rain is critical, okay? When you've got 100 and something trees out there that, as they grow older, of course, they're going to get stronger, and water's important, but not as important as it is now. So, yeah, talk about busy and then some, and then of course my chickens and the birds, and you guys hear them all the time in the background. So yeah, I'm busy and sweaty because it's humid here in South Florida. But anyway, let's get to the good part. The good part is who my guest is tonight, okay? And he's been here before, and it's gonna be such a good interview, yay! Because we were already talking about. I mean, I've appeared, I've been interviewed by him, and vice versa. But that's okay. Let me get to it. Who I've got here tonight is Reverend Sean Whittington. Okay, now he is a devout Catholic, ordained and trained registered exorcist. He's a deliverance minister, and him and his wife, who also had a near-death experience, and she's a certified minister through her Lutheran faith, who's also, by the way, an intuitive. They've both survived demonic attacks. We've talked about that. They're a husband and wife ghost busting team, and they're out of Las Vegas. But besides that, Reverend Sean, the Rev, has, believe me, he's gone up against the Satan full force, okay, because he went from the regular paranormal investigations to what we were talking about before we started recording, the ones where people, like a lot of paranormal teams, will either, if they're smart, they back out, or they peel out of the driveway of the people's house when they realize that whatever's there, whether it's human or non-human, is dark and malevolent. And like I said, he's the host of Vegas Supernatural on KCOR Radio, and he has that show every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And he just released a new book, God, Ghosts, and the Paranormal Ministry, a supernatural and spiritual autobiography, which, by the way, he was gracious enough to send me a copy, and I started reading it, and I told him even after the dedication, right off the introduction, it hooks you in, because right away he starts talking about the reality, and we're going to get into that when we speak to Sean, where the reality of what possession is, with a non-human entity. And believe me, it's much more disturbing than anything that you're going to see in any movie or show or any of that stuff. Believe it or not, it's they kind of like emphasize for dramatic purposes as there's much more to it, and this is the person that's going to tell us about it. So how are you doing today, Sean?
I'm doing wonderful, and you and I are gonna have to quit meeting like this. People are gonna talk.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, okay.
Um,
Yeah.
no, it's funny when I want to give a shout out to Annette Munich, owner of
Yes.
Stellium Books. Without her, my book would have never gotten published, and she did such a wonderful job. Totally went way beyond my expectations, and so I owe her big time. But she was setting me up a lot of guest appearances on other radio shows, and when I saw your name on there, I had to laugh. I don't know if she knew you and I were already friends, but I had to kind of laugh, and
Yeah.
and I told her, yeah, I know Marlene, and I, circled that on the calendar, and I was looking forward to today. But
Yes.
you said
I
something
was too.
funny at the very beginning. I know everybody's going to think you and I are probably doing the interview from the animal hospital that I work at because of your birds.
Yes.
And I've got the two big circus bears here.
Oh
My
my God.
wife's usually, yeah, my wife's usually babysitting them at the other end of the house when I do a radio show, and they
Okay.
stay calm. But she's not even home from work yet. So
Okay.
they are going nuts that I'm locked in the office trying to do an interview. They can hear me in here. And if they really wanted to bust through and get in here, they could. So if people hear that, we're not at an animal hospital. We're just
Let me tell you something.
home and we have animals.
Animals are worse than children.
Yeah,
They gotta be where you're at, or they talk about bad timing. They make noises. They do wild stuff. I tell everybody right about now it's dusk here in South Florida. Okay, it's about 7:30, and anybody that has had any amount of animals, especially roosters, this is when roosters. It's sun up and sundown is when roosters go crazy trying to either crow or get together with the chickens, and they run after and you'll hear them tramping up and down. They sound like elephants on my porch. And so you all know, if you hear it,
yeah,
it's nothing paranormal. It's the chickens.
yeah. And my two mastiffs think they're little pugs. So if you're sitting in a chair, they want to
Yes, I,
climb up on you and get your lap. If you lay
yes,
down in
yes,
bed, they're on top of you.
yes.
It's if you didn't love them so much, I would just have them outside in a
No,
dog
I know,
house. But
I know, I know.
they live
Mine
here,
too.
so.
Mine too.
But you also said something funny about these. Most of my clients, believe it or not, are paranormal teams that have found themselves in situations that they realize almost too late that they're in over their heads, and then they
Mm-hmm.
come to me. But you said talking about peeling out of the driveway it
Yeah.
reminds me of a case where when I pulled up, the family's pastor was already standing in the driveway and he wouldn't go
Oh.
into the house. He was waiting for me. And as soon as he introduced himself, we talked for a minute and I started going to the house. I turned around because I heard a car door shut. And when
And
I
he's
turned
like,
around, he's peeling out of the driveway.
that's right. It's like, okay, my conscience is clear. I left him in the hands of another reverend. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm out of here. Yeah.
I actually stood there for a second and went, I'll be honest, I know what these things are capable of, and I have no magic powers. I
Right.
sat there and gave it a second thought if I really even wanted to knock on the door.
Well, based on that, you'd be like, okay. And he made me think maybe I just won't tell him exactly what's there because then what if he leaves and then I'll be what if
Yeah,
he just decides, well, you know they belong to you've worked with them before, right? They go to your church, so I'm gonna leave you
yeah,
here. Yeah, yeah. People don't realize that there's a lot of clergy, and I'm not only talking priests. I'm talking ministers and clergy of different types of denominations. That they're great with the people in their church when it comes to life matters. Grief counseling, marriage counseling. There's sermons, but when it comes to stuff like this is where they're like, and this is where the ones that say how there's a lot of these clergy sometimes that they kind of poo-poo the devil and Satan kind of thing, as this is the part where they all of a sudden you realize no, you do believe in it.
yeah.
As a matter of fact, you don't want to mess with it. That's how much you believe in it.
Well, you know what? When I'm behind the scenes, what I'm most proud of is I'm still teaching those two classes, Introduction to Spiritual Warfare and Introduction to Paranormal Ministry,
Okay.
through the Worldwide Bible College and Theological Seminary. They're two 16-week online classes, but I designed the course for clergy that, and it's, if they say, I want me and you to be the only one that knows I'm taking this course through you, some of them have to worry about being excommunicated from their church.
What
Because
is that?
and so, but they have no knowledge when it comes to the paranormal. They're wonderful priests, they're
Right.
beautiful people, and they do believe in that. But they are, it's just something that's not really widely spoken about and talked about amongst in that
No.
field. Like, so they have to be very careful, and
Yes.
that's why I designed a lot of laity, of course, take the course, and then some people come to me, and I can tell they think they're going to get training to become an exorcist, and I have to point out right from the beginning, this is not a training course to make you become a exorcist. It's just to, give you the weapons you need in case you ever find yourself in a situation
Right.
where you have to
Imagine to
fight your way
recognize
out.
the earmarks, right? The
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, people get called in normally. Sometimes people go to their pastors or whatever when they're having something going on in their house, and you know, maybe they or they talk about things that have occurred to them or are happening to them. Where maybe they, after taking that course, they realize, okay, there's this more than there's something going on here.
Yes, absolutely. And a lot of them reach out to me too. I went to on a house blessing, Reverend, and just some odd things happened that I wanted to share with you just to pick your brain and see what you think. And then after we talked for a short period of time, I realized I'm honest with them and said, this is what I think. And then they'll go, you hit the nail right on the head. That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to see you, I wanted to hear you say it first. I think you need to go over there. So I'll get the address and the phone number, and he'll recontact them back and let them know that he's reached out to me. And everything's confidential with me for them not to worry. And you drive over to a home. I take all the Ghost Be Gone magnets off my car, and it's usually either me or just me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And they like that because they don't want to advertise to the neighborhood
No, no,
having
no.
issues. And you got three big black vans pull up and 20 investigators and thousands of
Pour
dollars.
out like, yeah,
Yeah,
cameras, lights. It's like,
yeah.
yeah, right.
So it's just, oh my gosh. I can't even tell you. Well, it wasn't my choice to get into this field. And I realize now that
Yeah.
I'm only here because of two acts of extreme divine intervention, and through a lot of talks that I had with my mother when I was young. And looking back on that 50 years later,
Mm-hmm.
I realized that it was all planned on the other side, and I was
Right.
meant to be here today doing exactly what I'm doing, but it wasn't my decision. And I actually got pulled into this to steal a phrase off of my then mentor when I got on this path. I got drug into this kicking and screaming, literally,
Yes.
because, Sharon and I worked a case where I used a Ouija board. I didn't know how to use the Ouija board. And I was just a Ghostbuster. I wasn't ordained. Hadn't really even worked any cases that I thought were demonic.
Right.
And whatever we did, wasn't the right thing. I don't even really know what we did that was wrong, but something followed us home that night, and then
Wow.
from there it just started. But yeah, helping Sharon fight for her life after 8 weeks of whatever it was took up residence in our home here.
Wow.
From that point on, it's just been crazy. And yeah, I didn't really have a choice. I just
You know what? What's
literally
really
got pulled
funny,
in.
Sean, other people that I've spoken to that do this, because there's some people out there that are like, I'm going to be an exorcist and I'm going to take, and it's like the most effective persons that I've spoken to that work with deliverance or exorcism tell me exactly what you said. That at the beginning, they really were kind of like, I don't think I want to do this.
Yeah,
And
I saw
kind of
the
like they go into
flip
it, like you said, they're drugged into it. Almost like, okay, no, we know you don't want to, but don't worry, we got your back.
I remember like it was yesterday I think I was 12 years old, and the whole family went down and waited for an hour and a half in line outside some theater in Westwood, California to see The Exorcist.
Oh,
And I
yes.
remember coming home, throwing my Ouija board out, taking down all my blacklight posters that looked kind of
Yeah.
demonic, and I slept with my parents. I kid you
Yes,
not, for like
I did too. I slept with my mother.
yeah, for like 2 weeks. So I
Yes.
remember that like it was yesterday, and um, that's still all that kind of stuff goes through your mind when you're walking up to a home,
Yes.
and especially if you've actually sometimes when you're sitting in a home, and all at once, like a bomb went off, you've got every cabinet door, every drawer, every bedroom door, and every window in the whole home opening and shutting and slamming all at one time. You have an outer body experience. Psychologically, for a moment or two, you can't wrap your head around it, and you're
Yes.
wondering, am I, you know, can I just disappear, not be here anymore, or is this really happening, or what? Is this
Yeah.
magic? I mean, what am I really experiencing here? And after you like, this is not just the movies, and
Exactly.
yeah, yeah, you have to be.
Well, and this is the
Yeah,
thing that people, when they go see all these, well, The Exorcist, of course, back then, that, like I said, back then people were a lot more innocent, and that's why there were so many people that wigged out. I mean, don't get me wrong, that movie was kind of like, but back then audiences were really innocent, and between now and then, but even now, they have all these different movies, which of course all of them have a demonic slant on them, and it's just not the ghost, but people don't realize that in real life, it's not like, there's not a resolution tied up in a bow. You know, this does plays havoc with your life, like you said. After what you innocently thought, you had weeks of. It sounds like having a very difficult, horrible time, and in your home, like where are you gonna go? This is where you live,
well, I remember Sharon and I went and saw The Conjuring together, the first one,
right?
and there's a an exorcism at the end of the book that I talk about that I had to think long and hard if I even wanted to put it in the book, and I spoke to a lot of my colleagues, and the decision was finally made. Yeah, we believe this story needs to be told,
Mm-hmm.
even though I did leave a couple of other stories out of it. But there's a very similar. Now, even though that exorcism didn't really take place in real life, in the end of The Conjuring in the basement
Right.
with
Yeah. Right.
there,
I know
it's
they had a
very
little bit of dramatic license with some of the storyline. Yeah.
absolutely, but it was so similar to something that her and I had experienced in real life.
Mm-hmm.
As that scene starts, Sharon is digging her nails into my hand, and we're just sinking back in our seats.
I
And it's
bet.
not because the movie was so scary,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody around us, of course, is scared. There's girls screaming and
Yeah.
little kids getting up, but we are frightened on a whole nother level because wow, we're like, how did they get that part so like? I know we
Yes.
just knew what we were thinking, so like what that one situation was, and yeah, it's in many cases it's just like that, and it's
See, but
you
that's the thing
know,
when you're part of the audience and you don't know any better. How's that? You just have, like you said, that good scare, and it's just the movie. Oh, okay, let's go home. Whatever, that's it. But when you see it from your point of view, where you like what you said, how did they get that so accurate? What?
oh, it's embarrassing too for me because and Sharon knows why, and she's looks at it different. But we go to a movie and there's an exorcism scene like that, and at the end of the movie, if deliverance is taking place, here I am bawling my eyes out like we went to some, love movie
Yeah, I
or
know.
whatever type of movie you would go to where you cry at the end, a sad
Yeah,
animal movie or
yeah,
something, and people around us are looking at us like, what's this guy's
yeah. It's
problem?
like, oh, you
And I'm
what's
crying like it's just, it's
yes.
just, yeah, it's embarrassing for her sometimes. But she knows, she just goes, let's go home, we're done. That was a good movie, let's go.
Well, and because your view of it, you know the reality of it, and people think of it just as for entertainment purposes only, whereas you think, okay, people don't realize either how accurate it is or how profound that moment is. Like you said, the deliverance, the point where whatever it is that's there is being cast out. Okay. And we were talking about this before we recorded, Sean, which I want to talk to you about, which is sometimes people think that this is a one-time deal, like you said, the deliverance, and that's it, people are off the hook. And sometimes they don't realize that they still got to work, like that you give them things that they need to do to keep their lives clear, in other words.
This is what I tell people. I look them right in their eyes and I say, you're the only one that, not even me. I mean, I may have been here and experienced some things with you, but you're the only one that truly knows deep down inside what you dodged, the bullet that you dodged, and what was about to happen to you. So now, whether you take this second chance that God's given you or not is entirely up to you. And I promise you, if you don't darn near spend the rest of your life walking on your hands and knees and praise God for giving you a second chance, this is going to happen to you again, and I guarantee you there's not enough help on this planet.
Let me ask you something.
When that happens,
do some people realize that the things that they got to avoid might be a lifelong thing? I think sometimes they don't realize that.
No, they don't. You have to talk to them about it. And
that you can't, like what you said, that you're going to look for the rest of your life. You know what? You're never, ever going to play with a Ouija board, and you've got to stay out of this type of... In other words,
You've been marked.
Yeah, you've right. Been marked. From now on, like, you are going to have to stay clear, and this is the kind of... Yeah, your path might be a little bit more narrow than other people's. It might not be fair, but it is what it is. And I think a lot of people sometimes have a hard time with that, especially after Hollywoodland kind of tells you, okay, the exorcism's done, whatever's been cast out, so everything is back to normal. And I don't think there's ever a thing as back to normal once you've been in that situation.
No, and I mean, there's even the smallest little things, like in the future, be careful who you date.
Yeah.
That's, you may see somebody that you think is sexy, and you guys hit it off, and you have so much in common, and you're in love. But you better really get to know that person ahead of time, because even that person can bring something back into your life, and it might be a setup.
Oh my God, that's how I was thinking. I was thinking that, and people will say, "Well," and you go, "Yeah, it could be that devious. It could be that manipulative, which is okay. Here, this person is, going along. They're doing good. They're okay. How do we? Okay, let's face it, a romantic partner." That is, like, in other words, they manipulate it so that you cross paths with the most inappropriate person that might not seem inappropriate from the get-go.
Yeah.
And it's all the master plan to pull you slowly back into a lifestyle or God knows what to make you vulnerable.
Yeah, and a lot of my colleagues don't like it when I talk like this. Sometimes they think that I talk these things up too much, and it's not that I'm talking them up. It's like I don't really care for the term demonology, and I don't really study about demons. Right. My approach is to try to learn as much as I can about the one that I serve, and not so much about delving into demonology, because I have enough of that around me. I don't want to delve into it, because you can also your mind can be getting infected, and you don't even know that your mind and your thoughts and how you look at things and perceive things are being infected and changed by studying that stuff.
Yes.
But these things are ancient, old, powerful, knowledgeable, smart, malevolent entities that have eternity on their side. And the one thing they are, if they're anything at all, is patient. Oh, yeah. And it may be 40 years till you run into that person that they purposely put in your path to run into. But you just have the rest of your life, once you've been marked, the rest of your life, you have to be careful.
Yes, it's exactly. And I think a lot of people, I'm sure you've heard of people, whether it's situations, friends, or romantic interests, that after the fact they'll say, you know what, at the beginning I had like this gut feeling, but I ignored it. Their intuition's telling me, you know what, you need to get out of here or stay away from this person, but they poo-poo it, and it's almost like you got to tell them, you got to pay attention to that, no matter how attractive this person might seem or how like enticing, for lack of a better word. If you have something in your intuition and your gut, if that gives you a hint that you need to follow. And usually you get that right at the beginning, I'm going to say. Right at the beginning, you have that voice that kind of pulls back and tells you, hey, you know what, this person is either too perfect or, you know, something here's not right, but
Your
this,
little angel on your shoulders whispering in your other ear.
yeah, of course, of
And
course.
I'm a big believer in guardian angels too, and I've
Yes.
seen mine twice, and both times she saved my life. So when I hear that little voice, I listen.
I think also that sometimes people don't realize whether it's your guardian angels or if you call another type of angel, sometimes they cannot help you unless you ask for the help.
Yeah.
Uh, in other words, unless you specifically say, uh, uh, you know, I need help right now with this specific, you know, it's almost like they're there, but if unless you ask for the help, they just, not that they don't want to, but you have to summon them, you have to ask them for the help.
Yes.
And some people they it's not like, and I know some people say, well, why wouldn't they? But it's because it always comes down to our free will,
Yes.
and that
Absolutely.
that always applies across the board, no matter what. We have free will, including and a lot of people don't realize that when you do ask for angelic help or you pray to, to God, to whatever, you have to kind of surrender in the sense of saying, I'm at this point, at this moment, whatever it is, I don't have control of this. You have to, and a lot of people have a hard time coming to that moment saying, you know what, I'm not in control of this and I can't help myself right this second. So I better ask for help. And some people have a hard time doing that, you know,
Yes.
especially when it comes to spiritual matters, I want to say. They,
Yeah, and they don't want to surrender to needing the help, and they also don't want to surrender to being honest with people around them that might be able to get them the help
yeah,
that they're having
yes.
those issues.
Sure, sure. Yes, exactly. And this is the thing also, Sean, people don't realize that sometimes asking for help, even if you want to say specifically, well, that, but sometimes you also have to see, like, get help me in whichever way. Sometimes it is bringing a certain person into your life that's going to help you. You see what I'm saying?
Yes,
Maybe, sometimes people want to get, well, I want this kind of help specifically, and sometimes you can ask, but then you can say, but if anything else, sure. In other words, leave it open, because maybe the help you need that you don't realize you need is in the form, like you said, of either a person or maybe a class or something that you just are not aware of. And then once you leave that door open, then it crosses paths with you. And then maybe later on you realize, man, thank God that happened, or I met this person, or because I realize now that otherwise, God knows what would have happened. So you always have to, like I said, like, stand back a little bit, and it's okay to be not have control of certain moments, especially when you're not really sure, or you feel like I'm out of my depth in this. There's nothing wrong with that,
absolutely.
by the way. There's nothing wrong with that, especially when you're
I
talking something along these lines.
I know your family is from Cuba, correct?
Yes.
Were you born here or are you born in Cuba?
No, I was born here in Miami.
Yeah, I was
I've
going to
never
ask you
been
if
to
you remember
Cuba.
growing up, if any of you remember, uh, seeing any other than traditional religious practices, if you experienced anything like voodoo or Santeria or anything like
Well,
that.
let's put it this way. My family did not. Well, in Santeria is, the Cuban version of voodoo. It's, they've got all their distinct kind of, even they're very similar because of, the slaves that were brought to the Caribbean, including Brazil also, which is got candomblé. They kind of made their own version of the belief system. In Cuba, it's the kind of white magic is Santeria. My family didn't believe in it. As a matter of fact, my mother and my aunt, they were both sent to convent school, you
Hmm.
know. But
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. I hate to say it. Uh, a lot of not there were some people that were adherents and they totally believed in it and they were parent. But then you would have the other ones. I hate to say it, that would go to Catholic, go to, you know, to mass on Sunday, but then they would go in through the back door of the person, get a reading or, do spell work. And here in Miami, they have now in strip shopping centers, they have botanicas, which is basically where you can buy a lot of the spiritual goods or things like that. You can get a reading, and then there's a dark side to Santeria, which sometimes we're talking here. When people go and they want to put a death curse on somebody or revenge. I mean, it's dark.
Yeah.
They you can go to a lot of the different cemeteries here, and I guarantee you're going to find some type of dismembered animal part, mostly chickens, thrown in there. I mean, I've
Yeah.
gone to a lot of the cemeteries, of course. I grew up in Miami. A lot
Yeah.
of the four ways, and I think I've told you about this. You're gonna railroad tracks. As a matter of fact, I've had a railroad track very close to my house. I want to say maybe like within half a mile. And I had this poor man who his property, one side of his property is on the tracks, right there. He
Yeah.
put up a big sign. He paid to get printed, like a banner.
Yeah.
Please stop leaving your offerings on the tracks.
Uh,
Because basically the tracks are a little bit elevated and then it
uh,
slopes down into on either side. And out here it's very agricultural, but this basically that side where you cross over, which is where everybody leaves it, is basically it slopes off into his front yard.
Now, what is the offerings on the railroad track really represent?
Basically, a lot of times I want to say that they'll do something. Uh, let's say bad luck. Let's say a person's having really bad luck, money problems. Let's go with that. They go with money problems, and they go to a santero, and they'll say, you know what, I've got a streak of bad luck, or somebody did something to me. Not really dark, not major, believe it or not. And they'll kill a chicken, and basically they do a ceremony where they use the live chicken to take away whatever it is that you've got on you, on a spiritual, and basically it's placed into that animal, okay, and it's killed
Mm.
and it's dropped on the railroad tracks. And of course, you know about the power of iron when it comes to overcoming the supernatural, and also that the train, like in other words, that this thing will not be able to return back to whoever it was. In other words, it will be taken away by the train and the iron, and it will not be able to return or go back to the originator.
Very interesting.
And yeah, you'll find a lot of bags, and you can look in there. You're gonna find body. Usually, chickens. Sometimes you'll get offerings. If you go to the beaches, you'll find if you see fruit floating along the water, it's that they've done some type of offering of fruits of ceremonies. That's very common here, and and sometimes you'll go to somebody's house, and like you said, you will look behind the door and they'll have some type of statue or something. And then there's people that are full-fledged, in other words, they don't, not only do they believe in it, they are either a priest or a priestess. And it's very demanding, the people that are involved in this, where sometimes they have a whole room dedicated to the what they call the santo, or that's claimed them. And they've basically have to dedicate a room and certain offerings and certain things. And it's let me tell you something, it's a lifestyle. It's you just and if to make any major decisions, you have to basically make sure that it's okay to
Yeah.
go ahead.
Have you ever been invited over to a friend's house and you had no clue they were into that, and then you see their altar set up?
One time I did go in there, and this was a while back, and it was a as a matter of fact, it was, I want to say he was a guy that one of my friends was dating. And I think we went by his house for something. I can't remember what. And he was starting to really get heavy into it, but we didn't know. And he did have a room. He had a closet. He opened up a closet. Okay.
Mm.
And it was like he was already, and I was like, ah. And it's really funny because a lot of it's like you could have the most modern looking person, that you think, no, they're the last thing, and they're very heavy into it. I had a friend, well, she's no longer my friend. I mean, I haven't seen her in many years, but she was brought up on it she was living in LA at the time, and she was brought up in it, and her mom was very, very heavily into it. As a matter of fact, would travel to Haiti sometimes to meet with voodoo priests over in Haiti. And I'm going to give you a perfect example. Uh, the Santos told her mom, like when she was barely like 15 or 16, you cannot live under the same roof with your daughter any longer. So her mom went and got her an apartment, and she had to live by herself. And of course, this led to her getting married very early with another guy whose parents were very, very heavily involved in this. And the she was very big, because basically you live it. This is not like I'm gonna you this kind of like, you live it. And at some point, she had a kid and she just wanted out. She says, I don't want to do it. And she moved down here to Miami, which is when we crossed paths, and we became pretty good friends. And she would tell me her mother would always tell her, because she had gone pretty high up. She had become a santo, which is when they basically do the ceremonies and everything that needs to be done. And she would tell me that her mom was constantly telling her, you need to work it, you can't throw this away. In other words, it's almost like, what you hear about the mafia, you can never really get out of it.
Blood in, blood out.
Yeah. And I mean, it doesn't help either when your parent is very, very, and her mom was very much sought after, because she would even tell me of her, of her mom being, possessed during ceremonies.
Wow.
And they said, she had various spirits, and she says that there was one that they called him in Spanish, el desconocido, which is the unknown one. They didn't know who he was, but that it was very masculine and rough, like monsterish. And she says they never knew what it was that would take her over during ceremonies. And I remember listening to her, and I'd be like, holy crap, I can't imagine seeing my mother do something. But yes, here you go from light, as in I kind of believe in it and I'll go get a reading, to the full Monty, where you are totally integrated with it. You'll go through some houses here in Dade County where they've got the life size, and when I mean life size, I'm talking 6 feet statue in their front yard, like usually in a shrine. Or that you walk in. I've walked into some houses and it's been like, whoa, okay. Because they're like more than life size in a way. Yeah. It demands a lot of, if you're into it, money and attention. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a dark side to it, by the way. There's they've gone out there. There's groups out here that go out in the woods, and they have found areas where they practice a lot of the dark magic, and there's sacrifice of different animals. Not only chickens, we're talking here, different animals, dogs, cats. And, they might want to call it, but there's absolutely a satanic overtones to it. I don't care, what the origin is of it. Because anything that demands the sacrifice of blood, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, but you're getting there into whatever it is you want to call it, under whatever umbrella you say the religion is. I don't care if it's my personal belief. Once you start sacrificing in something, whatever it is, whatever deities demands, or you got to feed it blood, okay, then I'm sorry, but you're into something very dark and satanic. So there's different variations, and of course we have a lot of cultures. There's a Haitian population here, and I'm telling you, they really believe in it.
Oh yeah.
They're very, very much believe that if somebody's placed a curse on them, a hex on them, it's not like they really adhere to, they're in fear of it. How's that? They fear the power of it. It's not like so, and by the same token, I've done investigations where people, they've been renting a property and they've had stuff done to the property, really meant for the owner of the house, but because they're renting now and they're living there, that thing has taken over, and it's been awful what they've had to endure. Even though it wasn't meant for them, I guess is my point. They've had to, they've suffered the consequences of that magic. It's not like, it's just for that one person or that one family.
Yeah, I got a little trouble too with some of my colleagues because did I tell you the story about the tree that was going to fall on my home?
Maybe you did, but I don't remember. Go ahead. Let's say, go.
Well, when Sharon and I moved here, the largest tree on the property, and it was huge. Okay. Finally, after many years, I knew it was struggling, but I tried to do whatever I could to keep it alive, and finally it came to the point where it had died,
Mm-hmm.
and it started to lean towards our house. And
Oh,
it was big. If it had landed, it probably would have taken out our master bedroom. But
okay.
if it fell to the left, it would cream our cars. If it fell to the right, it would cream my neighbor's house. So I, you know, I know who I believe in, and I know who I mostly pray to and stuff. But I've seen so many crazy things and have experienced so many crazy things in my life. I didn't want to leave any stones unturned, so I actually went out there because we were having some issues here at the house that I knew was something different than uh, a dark malevolent presence.
Okay.
And I see this very unusual rock in my flower garden. I asked Sharon, "Where did that rock come from?" "Oh, that's what I brought home many, many years ago from Hawaii when I lived there." I went, "Oh, honey, you know the theory is you don't bring anything away from the Hawaiian Islands." So I reached out to a guy I knew in Hawaii who's a
Okay.
chief of a tribe. "What should I do with this rock?" He says, "Well, it's going to be hard to ship it back. Just go out there and put it into a really, like the nicest area of your yard, put it there, and then
Okay.
give it some offerings and stuff." So
Mm-hmm.
I have one side, I have my colleagues like, "No, you're just going to invite trouble doing that. Just throw the rock away." But it's a beautiful rock. But I actually did go out there and I offered the rock some sugar and some candy and
Right.
some money and some perfumes, and I blew some incense on it. I put it in a really beautiful area of the yard where it'd get a lot of shade and water and stuff. And then I went out and did the same thing to the tree. I blessed the property first. I prayed to God and my guardian angel and all the other angels that have helped me in dire times in my life. But then after I did that, I blessed the ground and I put some candy and
Yes.
fruits and money and some other peanuts and things like that around the ground of the tree. And I said, "Please, whatever you do, don't
Mm-hmm.
let this tree
Yep.
fall on my house, my neighbor's house, or the cars." Now, we woke up the next day and the tree completely went in the opposite direction that it was leaning,
Wow.
landed right in our yard, missing the cars, missing my house, missing my neighbors, and landing
Yes.
just short of the sidewalk so people could still walk by and it wouldn't hit nobody.
Is that incredible or what? God, Sean, that's a great story.
So
That's
it's the elementals. I'm a big
yes.
believer in that too,
Yes.
but I don't pray to them. I'm not
Well,
asking them. I
this
guess
is
I did pray to them. I
no,
mean, I'm
no,
being.
no. You know what? I think the earth is a living thing. I do believe in elementals. But I think that once, like I said, one thing is that, like you said, you took it and you basically said, look, maybe we made a mistake, but here you're back and here's some. That's not blood. You're not killing an animal. You're not feeding it blood or a life. Or in some cases, some of them do it even to agonize the animal. Once you get, that's the offering you're making, whatever demands that type of offering, you're in deep doo doo. I'm telling you that right now. That's different, totally different from what you described that you did. Because they say, that I believe the earth is alive and elementals and even plants and animals, and there's on the metaphysical or spiritual plane, there's a symbiosis that sometimes we just don't see. We feel it sometimes, but we just don't see it all the time. And that's different. That's different. Um, I mean, like, I'll tell you, like, there was a big property across from my where I live at, and the guy has acres, and he used to breed. He had stables with thoroughbreds, but he had acres and acres of trees, fruit trees, and he sold it. And the guy that took it over, he runs like rodeo shows. He trains horses, but I guess he wanted to open up a lot of the field to train the horses. So he cut down so many trees for so many days, and I was hurting. I was in agony. I was like,
Oh,
and it was like, okay, okay, Marlene, it's just trees. But no, it was like, oh my God, I can't take this. It was hurting me, and it was hurting me. It's difficult to explain, but for the 2 or 3 days, I was hearing these saws going because I'm telling you, there were huge trees. He was making a lot. The prior owner was making a lot of money off these full grown trees. They're kind of like they're called Logan trees. I have some in my yard.
hmm.
Um, and they had been there for years. They had to have been at least 20 years. And I was like, oh my God, I can't take this. And it was like you kind of feel, like what they talk about the Star Wars, something in the Force. You feel a thing in the Force, and I was like, I can't take this too much because this better be over quick.
What
But
a waste! And you wonder what if that brings any bad mojo on your
I
property.
don't, you know what? All it was like, um, no, I was like, it was like, even when they were, because they had cut down so many trees that what they ended up doing was burning the debris, the leftover trees.
Mhm.
And I remember that all I did was because one day we had a big wind and it was blowing westward and from east to west over to my house, and my house is made of wood. It's 100 years old. And I remember all I did was I called the fire department and I said, look, I need you guys to check over there and make sure these people know what they're doing, because the last thing I need is some embers to fly over my house to my house, and that's it.
Yeah,
But at that point it was like the trees were down. They were like, all I was concerned was it was on a strictly practical basis. It was before that when they were doing that to the trees. It was like, oh my god,
yeah, that's,
oh
yeah. I mean, it's everybody wants a desert landscape here. I'm only allowed to water like 2 days a week, but I still water my lawn, and at least it's not a fairway on a golf course, but at least I have a little bit of a lawn left. And they wanted me to cut
yes,
down all my shrubbery and other trees and stuff, and I'm like, no. It just, to me, it seems, it's just, no, I don't want to do that. I know it would just hurt to have to cut all of that stuff down. It's
no,
part of nature, it's part of the
no,
yard.
no. As a matter of fact, sometimes I'll go sometimes to the plant department and like Home Depot or Lowe's or something, and sometimes they've got these poor plants that are like drying out
Yeah,
and they're hanging out like for 50 cents, and I'm like, I'm gonna rescue you. Okay, it's Marlene,
yeah,
stop it.
me
But
too.
yeah, I'm like, when it comes to stuff like that, yeah, it's like I'm a real pushover when it comes to that stuff. But yeah, I do believe, getting back to what you were originally saying about that story about the what you did, that yeah, there is a symbiosis on a metaphysical level between, even though once we're talking plant life and we're totally different. Yeah, there is, and they've done experiments where plants and trees react to music, they react to human emotions. Uh, we're not so totally separate. Even though they, it's plant life, but yeah, I think
Yeah.
that. But what happened? And then you got the tree cleared away, and everything
Yeah,
went
we had
back to
a we
normal.
had a nice gentleman that we contacted who came out and sawed it all up and hauled all the wood away. And while he was here, there were a couple other trees, some real small ones that were dying, that we had him just take the dead branches off. And we have this one huge palm tree, and then when the palms die, it's
Yeah.
just the dead brown palms all the way down to the ground. We
Mm-hmm.
had all that cut away and some other yard work done, but for the most part, I've left my landscaping the way it is because I just don't see it necessary to just butcher it up and
Yeah.
have just my lawn be nothing but rocks because I live in the desert.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. You live in a totally different climate there, as far as, even though the weather was kind of wonky this last winter over there in that area, wasn't it? Like,
yeah, yeah, we had some big snowstorm come
yeah, it
through
was
here.
like
So I
it's like
I
snowing in
lost
Vegas or
TV
something like that.
signal and internet signal and couldn't even get in or out of our driveway. And we were like, it looked like the end of the movie The Shining. I expected to see Jack Nicholson walking across my yard and with carrying an axe.
Yeah, it's like
It
I'm
was
home.
and I don't never see that stuff, so it was pretty. It was. You're like, wow, this must really feel like. I mean, there's something to being snowed in.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it was crazy. We did have a crazy winter, but now it's going to be just another brutal 3 or 4 months being on the surface of Mars.
Yeah, that you were mentioning, and yeah, that down here it's hot and humid, but where you're at, it's hot and dry, but really hot, as far as very desert like.
It's like, well, when it's 115 to 120 degrees every day for like 2 months, it's like being in an oven.
Oh.
And you just don't go outside. Your world stops. You go to work, you come home, and then you're
Mm-hmm.
You've got the AC cranking, and you've got extra box fans turned on high, all pointed right at you while
Wow.
you're sitting in your most comfortable chair in your underwear watching TV with a big cold drink, and you don't do nothing else
Can
because
you
it's just,
imagine what life must have been like out there before, modern stuff like AC and things like that?
oh my
You're like,
gosh.
okay.
Well, ask the Paiute Indians here. I have several friends that are indigenous to this indigenous peoples that have lived here, mainly Paiutes,
Uh huh.
and they is it's that's they love it. You know.
And one of the books I, one of the, well, my first book that I wrote about, which was the Wicked Ladies of the Old West, old Haunted History of the Old West Wicked Ladies. One of the towns I wrote about was one that it would, back then they would have these mining towns. It was called Rhyolite. I believe it was right at the
Oh
entrance
yeah,
to,
I've been there.
yeah, and it was right at the entrance to Death Valley, and anyway, it was like, all these towns existed as long as the mines were going, and
Yeah,
if the mining
absolutely.
went, so the town like went, like it would empty out as fast as it became full of people, just as easily as it would depopulate. And
Hence the name Boomtown.
yeah, those were boom towns. Like, I mean, they would put stuff up like basically overnight, and I was thinking, you think this, because it was up there like at the turn of the century is when it took off, and you think about, man, can you imagine living with that heat, like without the benefits of what you said, the AC and all the electricity and things like that? God, that must have been rough.
You know it was. Oh my gosh. And then you go into Death Valley,
Uh
it's like
huh.
a completely different world. I mean, it can be 120 here in
Right.
the Vegas Valley, and then it's easily, if it's 120 here, it may be 130 in
Wow.
Death Valley, and it's just, oh my gosh,
Brutal, huh?
it's brutal there, yeah. And you've got
Yes.
some really haunted ghost towns all through
Yeah,
Death
that's what I.
Valley.
Well, people don't realize that when they would have these frontier towns, that you had a lot of people go in there, and a lot of the people that went in there were kind of like very very dangerous, for lack of a better word. I mean, yeah,
Oh yeah. You look at them wrong and they just shoot you and nobody else
yeah.
care.
They want
Oh,
to
I
either.
wonder why that guy shot that guy. Oh well.
Yeah, it was like,
Nobody
yeah, it was
cared.
like, yeah, you had merchants, and you had ladies of the evening putting up brothels, and but at the same time you had a lot of dangerous people that were out there to make money or steal or jump somebody's claim. And I mean, really had to keep your wits about you, and people would be get killed easily, very easily, by the way.
That's why I think ghost hunters should be a little more careful than what it seems like they are. I understand everybody wants to try to get, the next best piece of
Mm-hmm.
um, evidence of the afterlife. But a lot like when they go to these insane
Oh
asylums
God.
and they go to like these ghost towns, remember, a lot of these ghosts there, they were pissed off in life and they're even more
Oh
pissed
yes,
off in death.
they're dark. They were dark human beings. Forget the
Yeah.
pissed off part. They were dark human beings, and I'm glad you pointed that out, Sean, because of course everybody thinks demonic, and it's like, folks, there's a lot of entities that are human, origin are
Just
human,
mean. Yeah.
but they were horrible human beings that maybe had some type of dark influence, but whatever, they were humans, and if they're still earthbound, they're very dangerous, just as much as anything that's not human.
Yeah, I never got into the provoking, especially now that
Oh
I became
God.
an ordained minister. And a lot of the demonologists do a thing they call religious provocation. I learned quickly that just my presence there is provocation enough. First of all, people
Yes.
are surprised when I tell them before I even show up many times, I have the family send their kids off to a babysitter and send
Yes.
their animals to a kennel for a day or two. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
kids and animals in the home because I sometimes can just show up and whatever's there gets just angry
Yes.
that I'm just even there. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
sense to go in there and antagonize. You're really, I mean, it's taking the whole poking the bear with the stick to another level.
And I'm gonna give you a for instance, and we were talking about when you've got something that's dark and manipulative. Okay, it's already gonna be over almost 2 years. I was asked by a group to help them out with something, and they suspected it was non-human, but anyway, I told them, don't tell me too much. Just, well, I'll go and we'll see what's up. Okay, to make a long story short, she suspected it was a guy with his girlfriend that lived in the house. She suspected that an ex-boyfriend of hers who happened to be involved in Santeria had put some type of curse, and she had taken some pictures and blah blah blah. So that's why they had called me if I would go. I said, okay, fine, let's see what's what. To make a long story short, it turned out that it wasn't exactly that. And if you want, turns out this lady, she was very nice, but she had a heroin addiction. Okay. And she had been using, I got to talking to her. She had very bad childhood experience. Her dad had been murdered, and basically she was the oldest of 4 kids, and she had started using drugs, after that. And then I want to say maybe when I met her, she was in her early 30s. Basically, she was, and coincidentally, okay, the day that we're doing that, all of a sudden she tells us her mom had died. That I was like, your what? Your mother died? We like looked at each other, the people that were in the group, thinking, you could have called us and said, look, I don't want to do this, postpone it. And I want to say that I think that whatever, I'm not going to say that whatever was there, because basically, I kind of like did a thing with her, and we talked about what she had attached to her. And I think that it had been making an effort to have us not go there, okay? Because apparently her mom had been ill, but I think that the fact that her mom had died specifically on the day that we were to go, I think that there was some type of manipulation in the background. But
the day you went, she died.
Yes!
That's crazy.
We were there. And then all of a sudden she says, oh, by the way, somebody, the other girl, the other lady, the original team comes up to me and goes, do you know that her mom died today? And I was like, what? Her what died? Today? And I was like, okay. And then later on when I was talking to her, she kind of said, and I said, look, I'm sorry for your loss. But I was like, okay, but I'm thinking, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I talked to her later on, and it wasn't like she had a bad relationship with her mother. It wasn't like, oh, even though she was my mother, no, she apparently, but for some reason, I don't know how. And I want to say, at that point, I thought, okay, whatever is here that's attached to her, which by the way, it wasn't really the house. The worst attachment she had was to her, I think was trying to kind of have us not go.
Yeah.
With the death of the mother. And then I'm going to give you a little bit. Sometimes when people, they really need to do research. That the house that was next door to theirs, it was empty. The people had moved out, and they had been renting it out, but it was presently empty. And I kept telling them, there's something from that yard, that house that's coming over here. You've got something going on over here. You've got your stuff. And later on, they told us that a prior owner had dropped dead of a heart attack in the house, but I don't think he was a real problem. Contrary to what people believe, not just because people die suddenly in a house, that means they're going to haunt. And I was talking to the girl, and then later on, I said, definitely there's something coming over from this other side. Okay, and it wants human interaction, and that's why it comes and it bleeds over into your yard and blah, 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 blah. And later on, we established some other non-human stuff. But anyway, Sean, later on, I started doing research on that property next door, which, by the way, this was a nice residential area. Turns out, because the family that had lived there for many, 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 many years, okay, since the 70s, I found out that the parent of one of the people that lived there, this man had been hung. Listen to this. Even he had immigrated from Germany, and he had been hung here in the United States as a Nazi, as a sympathizer. Okay. And I was like, huh? And obviously, children, you can't say, well, you can't be blamed for what your parents did or believed in politically or what they did. But I'm telling you, I do believe sometimes that you do have some type of spiritual turbulence that follows the family around, starting maybe with one person, and then it very subtly just basically tags along with the offspring, even if they're not aware of it. And it was like, when I researched that, I was like, wow, this man was hung. No, I take it back. What did he hang himself? He was being detained here. He was imprisoned for being a Nazi sympathizer, like Nazi, like pro-Nazi. And I think before he went to trial or something, he hung himself. It was like very dark,
Yeah.
And then of course the family moves on. Kids grow up. This was happened back in
We
the
we
40s.
we hear people talk all the time about, residual haunts and
Yeah,
intelligent haunts, and even if his spirit didn't remain, the act
yeah,
of what he had done
yeah.
could have left a residual imprint there. But then a lot of people don't take this into consideration. Sometimes a residual haunt is so dark it invites more darkness,
Well, this
and then
man,
it,
and this thing with the father didn't happen here at that house. I mean, they had lived there. The family had lived there. Had lived there. I want to say for like, I want to say since the 1960s. They had basically the child of this man, one of them, the father. As a matter of fact, he had moved there, and he basically moved into the house when it was like a brand new development. Brought up his family, and he died. As a matter of fact, he died in the house, and his wife had, I think she had died later on after leaving the house. But when I started researching the family and going back and back, I found that in another state, and his dad, this had happened in the
wow.
40s. Okay, and you could say, well, how does that figure? And I'm thinking, sometimes stuff like this tags along. It doesn't even have to be the same actual space. It's the influence of whatever was there to begin with.
Yeah.
And
It's just another form of attachment. Yeah.
yes, it is. It
It's like
is.
you step on gum and it sticks to your shoe.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
it was also had the tie of it being a blood relative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I can tell this is like the perfect storm. Then they lived next to a couple. He was a homeowner, and she would live there with him and stuff like that. Of all the people, the most vulnerable, she's, extreme trauma in childhood, drug use to the point that she was using heroin now. And she pretty much had it under control in the sense of she was, but she had, as a matter of fact, she had done jail time, and she had been clean for the few years that she had been in jail, which meant she could stay clean.
Yeah.
But once she got out of prison, um, they have a drug called Suboxone, which is what they usually give people that are trying to come off of heroin. But it's legal. In other words, she started with that when she got out, which she was legally taking it, and of course later on she went right back into doing heroin. And it was like, man, talk about the worst person living next to. It was like, what, you know.
Yeah.
It was like one of those things that you think, man, how a lot of these things sometimes are manipulated behind the scenes, as far as the most vulnerable person living in areas or places, which is like, man, you shouldn't be here. This is not the place for you.
Yeah.
And then throw in the death of a parent, and in the, I mean, we shot audio and video, and then you hear dogs barking, and we had specifically told them, hey, the adult dogs, you need to like. And she, as a matter of fact, she left and she was gone for like 20 minutes because she took the dogs to like a neighbor or somebody that lived like 2 or 3 miles away, and you hear distinctly when we're doing some of the work barking. And by the way, one house was empty on one side, the back of the house was on a lake, and then the other side they had no dogs. Plus, we're inside a house that was, the AC was on, and you distinctly hear dogs barking and barking and barking and barking. And we played it
Wow.
back. So that's, yeah. There was a lot of weird, funky stuff going on in there, uh, and and I'm going to ask you about this. Contrary to what a lot of people believe, they think that sometimes these dark hauntings or infestations, whatever you want to call them, have to be really in your face. And sometimes I think they're a lot more subtle because it's almost like they want to get a good foothold in before somebody realizes what's going on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And they enjoy it, and they're having a good time. Whatever it is they're doing, they're having a good time. It's just they're comfortable, watching, waiting, um, uh, doing their little, doing their thing, just and influencing. It's big with
Yes.
them, the bad influencing.
In other words, it's not you're not going to be doing backward somersaults right off the bat.
No.
As a lot of people think.
Yeah, but the flip side of that coin, though, sometimes, I've worked cases where stuff happens,
Mm-hmm.
boom, 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 fast, and
Okay.
you're overwhelmed at how fast things escalated.
That it went to something really dangerous.
Fast, yeah, like you commented, the little introduction in the book that I have that catches you, and I talk about that case later on in the
Yes.
book. That happened fast to that family, and we still don't really even know what that whole thing was about.
Okay.
But they ultimately, and I hate telling people they have to move. I actually didn't recommend they do that, but they on their own made the decision to relocate
Okay.
to California to be with family, which turned
Okay.
out to be a really good thing. But
Yeah.
they had, in that short period of time, their ordeal was so horrific, and it was came on like gangbusters. It was just wow.
And
Um,
what did they have any idea what the origin was, or after what was a triggering event?
the only thing I can think, and this is just total speculation and my
Mm-hmm.
theory, and theories are like, what, everybody's got one.
Yes. Uh huh.
Um, she was Cajun Creole,
Okay.
and many of her family. She's from Louisiana, living here in Vegas, single mother
Mm-hmm.
with two small sons, and
Okay.
she had many family members back into the old Southern hoodoo and
Okay.
voodoo and things
Mm-hmm.
of that nature. And it
Okay.
could have been a transgenerational curse attached to them, but
Yeah.
her little boy, her youngest boy, comes home from school one day, just really frightened out of his wits, and she asked him, what's wrong? He said this weird little kid came up to him at the park that he plays at for a little while on his way home from school every day. But today, this weird little kid came up and wanted to play with him, and none of the other kids could see the kid.
Oh
So
boy.
he took off and ran home, and the little weird kid that nobody else could see chased that kid all the way home. So when he finally ran into the house, how
Yeah.
it was when you were a kid and you got chased home. You
Yeah.
can't talk, you got to catch your breath, and your parents think you're dying because you're gasping for
Yeah.
air. You're so scared you're crying. Well, the kid's freaked out, and so the mother thinks at first he's full of it. He's playing tricks with.
Right.
He's just so emotional, and it was just so creepy. She actually thought it was a real kid that followed him home. So she went out and looked all around the yard, up and down the street. There was no kid around. And then later that night, about 3 in the morning, and it's always 3 in the morning,
Yes.
she said her son crawled into bed with her. But when he crawled into bed with her, it felt like he had just came in from having swam in the pool. Like he was like just like a block of ice had crawled into bed with her, and he was spooning with her to her back. But then she got this really bad odor and just sensed there was something odd about that whole situation. So she reached over and turned the light on the nightstand, turned over, and there was no one in bed. So that morning, she finds her little kid making himself some waffles or breakfast cereal or something, getting ready to go to school that day. And she asks him, "Did you crawl into bed with me in the middle of the night last night?" And he said, "No, mommy, that was the little boy." She goes, "Excuse me?" So here's
Wow.
something else I want people out there listening to remember. If a weird little kid that nobody but you can see comes knocking on your back door wanting to get in, don't let
Don't
him in.
open it. Don't let him
But he
open the
did.
door.
He said, "Mommy, I came down to get a snack last night. You were asleep, and he was at the back door asking to come in, and I let him in." The mom said, it was like I saw my life flash in front of my eyes. Like, this is just, she was in
Yes.
denial. This is too weird. But I mean, almost immediately, in just within a few days, the little kid became very violent, attacked a couple of kids at school. They
Wow.
suspended him. Um, he, what got me over there was we had already spoke once, And then he attacked his older brother. The child was only 10 years old. He had like a 13-year-old brother, but he attacked his brother so badly he almost killed him. She got the older son out of the house and to a neighbor's, but then the little kid barricaded himself in the room, and she didn't know what he barricaded himself in there with, but she couldn't get into the room to help him. But she said the things that I heard in there and the smells and whatever was going on in there, you know, you got to come now. So that was where I came in. And now you got to understand, during this time, I'm just in training to become ordained. And
He's like, I'm only trained.
Yeah, Sharon's at home fighting for her life, because when the demonic attack that we experienced here in the home, quite some time prior to that, a couple of years prior to that, left her with 3 very rare forms of cancer.
Wow.
A very rare form of tongue cancer, throat cancer, and medullary thyroid cancer, which is the worst of the 2 thyroid cancers. It's the one that's much more severe and it spreads, and there's no cure for it like regular thyroid cancer. So, I mean, Sharon wasn't expected to survive that. She went through 35 straight treatments of radiation and 6 weeks of chemo, which almost killed her. She couldn't talk for about 8 months, had a feeding tube in for over a year, couldn't even swallow water for about 4 months. It was brutal.
Yes.
And everybody says, well, how do you know it was a demonic attack? Well, Sharon didn't drink and didn't smoke, was the healthiest person on the face of the earth that I knew. No history of cancer in her family. And we had just got rid of whatever that was in our house for about 8 weeks. And it came on like, the attack came on like gangbusters after we got this thing out of the house. Like, that was what he wanted to leave behind.
Right. Like and that's said, just but you can't say, hey, the lifestyle, like you said, if maybe there was smoking or something that you could say, well, but yeah.
Well, I had a friend that I've known since childhood that was on the East Coast dying of advanced colon cancer, and he was an atheist. Mm-hmm. And he called me on his deathbed. I kid you not, called me on his deathbed to say goodbye to me, but he wanted to tell me that he had just seen God, and that God told him to tell me that Sharon was going to live, and that I needed to put up the fight against those responsible for what happened to her. So a big light went off there. And I mean, other things happened right after that actually had me leave the field for a while. But so all this is on my mind. I went to bed many a night thinking I was going to wake up the next morning next to my wife being dead. That's how. But here I am waiting for her to fall asleep, and I'm sneaking out to go work this case. And this is mother telling me on the phone what's been going on. I'm not going over there by myself, which I don't advise either. But
yeah,
I got there. True story. I knew I was at the right place because there's a woman in flip-flops, underwear, a wife beater T-shirt, and I just call it that because everybody calls them that. Just a white tank top that a lot of women, their blouses, hair all wet like she just got out of the shower, holding a little puppy dog. I knew I was in the right place, and she wouldn't go in the house. And that's when she said that thing to me that what's in there isn't my son. You need to go in there and help him. And so then I went in there, and that was I did not want to go, and I'm telling you, it was the last place I wanted to be on the face of the earth because there was just so much going on in my life at that time, and I didn't know really what I was up against. But I went upstairs. I couldn't get in the room. I pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. Finally got just enough space of the door to open to look in there, and there's a man, an old man, sitting on his butt with his knees pulled up to his chest on the opposite corner of the room on the floor. And I'm like, that's not even the son. I'm like, who is that? I'm staring at him. And so I maybe the man's in there doing
You're thinking, okay, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's like the trap door.
I get my head through and I look, and there's a double bunk bed pushed up against the door. I finally managed to get in there far enough to get me in there, and I'm not super skinny, but I get into this room, And as soon as I get into the room, the door slams behind me. The bed goes back up against the door. So, well, now I'm in there. I can't get. It's like that old, it's like that scene from Bronx Tale where the owner of the bar looks at the bikers and go, "Well, now you can't leave." So,
Okay, Sean.
I had left the field because I had already had my serious demonic attack
Yeah, you were like, yeah, okay, uh-huh. Yeah.
a couple cases prior to that, so I knew what that felt like. And I get hit by the same. This man looks up at me, and if he was he looked like he was 100 years old, and I'm just staring at him. He's staring at me, and then I get hit by the same feeling I got hit by when I experienced my demonic attack, which is basically I blacked out. And I don't know how long I was blacked out for, but when I came to, I was on my knees in the middle of the bedroom, but I'm outside now. I'm like in the desert.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm like, somebody's mugged me and brought me out to the desert, and this was all a setup. But there's that old man sitting in the dirt 5 feet away from me, looking down. And so right then I knew there's more to this than what's really going on.
Okay.
But I can't move. I'm like a sack of potatoes. I'm so frightened. I'm starting to think, have you been drugged to hell? Because I thought I was getting drugged to hell during that first
I
attack.
bet.
Did they accomplish what they set out to do? Am I there now? And then a shadow comes over me, right to left, across the ground in front of me, and I feel a presence to my right. And I look over, and it's like when you see things, like I said earlier in the interview, that you can't wrap your mind around.
Mm-hmm.
I'm staring at this image, and I can't wrap my mind around. I know exactly what I'm looking at, but I can't wrap my mind around the fact that I'm looking at Jesus Christ on the cross.
I'm
And
getting a shiver up my back right now when you just said that. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
I know that's what I'm looking at. And so I'm assuming, okay, well, I may be in hell, but I need to get over to that cross because that's my salvation. Now, you have to understand, Jesus didn't look like Jesus like it
Right.
just looked like a mutilated slab of meat basically hanging on a tree. And I walk over there, I crawled actually over there, and I touched to make sure the cross was solid, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
And I stand up. I use the cross to help me up, and I have to actually get on my tippy toes. And I'll never forget noticing that the feet were left over right. And to
Okay.
this day, whenever I look at a crucifix, I always look at the feet. Sometimes they're right over left or they're side
Mm-hmm.
by side. And I always look now to see if they're left over right, and I buy those. I don't care where I'm
Yeah,
at.
there you go.
But it was left over right, and I actually kissed his left foot, and I can still remember the taste of all the blood and dried blood and dirt and mud on his foot. As soon as I kissed his foot, I had a flashback of a time when I was probably 10 years old, and I was being chased home by three bullies that I was convinced were going to beat me to death. And I don't know how long I ran. And now my father worked at the time. He would be gone before I woke up, and he would arrive home long after I went to bed. That's how far of a drive he had to get to work. But on this particular day, when these guys had just about caught me and I'm running across this road, a car comes screeching to a halt, honking at me, and it's my dad.
Oh, wow.
On this one day, he comes home, and I just collapse in front of the car. He gets out of the car and he sees these three kids. It would be inappropriate for me to tell you what my dad did to these three kids,
I'm glad.
but
Whatever it was, I'm glad because, yeah.
that that feeling of you thought you were about to get beaten to death, and the one true hero in your life,
Yeah.
which he'll always be, shows up. That's the exact feeling I had and flashback I had when I kissed Jesus's foot, and I knew that I didn't have a thing to worry about. And I can't tell you how I knew what to do, but I knew to spin around and walk over to that old man. And I got down on my knees in front of this old man, and I just started pouring water on his head, wiping my fingers full of holy oil and holy water, wiping it across his head. I must have said the Our Father 50 times, maybe 20 Hail Marys. But now I can see beyond him, and it's a dirt path going down. And at the bottom of the dirt path are three, maybe four hooded figures, and I can't tell if they're male or female or even see faces.
Okay.
And then there's several black dogs running around there. And there's another case I worked that I talk about in the book with one of those dogs. And I see them down there, and I know that that's hell. And I know this is the little boy, and that's his next. If I can't get him from this spot, that's where he's going.
Yeah.
And I just kept doing what I was doing. And the next thing I know, I kind of blacked out again, I assume, because I raised my head and opened my eyes, and now it's actually a little boy sitting in front of me, and we're back in the bedroom. We're not in the desert anymore.
So basically, what you had been, when you looked in, and what looked like an old man was really the kid.
I didn't know that
Right. You were like thinking, okay, how'd this old guy get in here?
Yeah. So the kid's looking at me and I'm looking at him, and we don't say a word, but we both know something miraculous has just happened, and we just hug each other and start crying. And I help him up to his feet, and we get over to the bedroom door. Now it's easy to move the bunk bed out of the way with one hand. And I open the door, and we walk right out of the bedroom, go downstairs, and his mother's in the living room waiting for us, and she's got the same look on her face like she knows something miraculous happened. The son runs to his mother. They hug. We all sit down at the living room table, and the only thing I can think to say is anybody hungry? How about a pizza? Well, let's order a pizza. And I picked up the phone and I ordered pizza at a brand new Papa John's. Let's just give them a plug. They just opened up down the street, and we waited for pizza to show up, and we ate. We never spoke one word about what had happened.
Okay.
We ate. I went home. I got home. Sharon was sound asleep with my two circus bears on either side of her, protecting her. And the next call I got from the mother was that she took both her kids out of school, told the landlord they were leaving, breaking the lease, they didn't care, and they were moving to LA to be with family. And I just thought that's a wonderful thing to do. And we still occasionally touch base, and they're all doing great.
I love it. That's great. That's fantastic. And you know what? It's really weird because that thing of what you mentioned that he saw, I mean, that the kid had followed him, but that actually almost like whatever that was, had to be allowed or invited into the house. And it's almost like maybe it targeted him because a child doesn't know any better of, maybe if it would have been the mother, it would have been like, who's this kid out there? I'm not going to open the door. It's one of those things because I have heard when, that you talked earlier about, there's a lot of this dark magic where they will send a dark spirit to you, and they'll say, oh, if you hear like 3 knocks on the door, don't open the door. It's like, in other words, especially if it's a moment where like exactly like that, you're not expecting company.
I'm telling you, anybody out there listening, that happens. Sharon has been standing right at our front door, and there's little lattice windows in our front door, and I'm 2 feet away at the kitchen table, and we will hear the 3 knocks on the door. We just really assume it's a kid up there, selling something, or one of our neighbors needs something, and Sharon will, standing right there, will look out the door and look back at me and whisper, "There's nobody there." And I just look at her and go, get over here and sit down. Get away from the door.
Get away from the
Don't open it.
Don't open it. Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it happens all the time. And sometimes I get home from work and I go to reach at the front door, and it really feels like something has bit my right hand. I look down. Sure enough, I have these 3 little scratches.
Yes.
They can't get in, but they're mad that I'm going to go.
Yes.
They're right there. They just claw my little hand right there, and I walk in, and I don't say nothing to Sharon. We're eating dinner together, and she'll go, "Hey, what happened to your hand?" She goes, "Oh, did that happen when you're trying to get in again?" Because she's been with me. When we've been come home from a restaurant or a movie or took a drive somewhere, and I go to reach for the front door, and I pull my hand back and look at it, and you don't see nothing at first. She goes, "What are you doing?" I go, "I don't know. I just thought I felt something weird." Sure enough, a few minutes later in the kitchen, she'll go, look at your hand, and they'll right on the top of the hand will be 3 scrapes across there. But I know they can't get
Yes.
in because I'm constantly blessing and
The
sealing
entrance.
my home. But they're out there mad,
Yes.
and they
And
want you to
and
know that they're
people
watching.
people don't understand though, Sean. Because people we think of it in human terms as an invitation. You have we think of it like as somebody sends out an invitation. You have to say basically, yeah, send out the invitation like, hey, you're invited. But sometimes the act of opening the door after somebody knocks,
Yep,
they will
yep,
take it as the invitation.
absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely.
You don't have to actually say, come on in. It's like, oh, we knocked, you opened, you are inviting us in. And it's kind of like sneaky, but of course, what did you expect?
Yeah.
Yes, I've heard of that. That a lot of times when
They
people are
can
trying to
make
curse
sounds
somebody
like
else,
they crash through your roof into your attic, and you open up your attic door to peek in there, and they couldn't have gotten into the house, but they did once you opened up the attic door to look
yes,
up there at what that
yes,
noise was. They're
yes,
sneaky.
yes, yes, it happens like that,
So
where
with
they try
people
to
out there
trick you
blessing
into
your
it.
home, yeah, bless everything. Get up in the attic. Get that, get
Yes.
your holy incenses, smoke up there in the attic, and your holy water
Mm-hmm.
all over the attic, basements,
Yes.
everywhere, cabinets,
Yes.
closets, all the bathroom. I
You
mean,
have to
get
open
that
up your
stuff
cupboards and
everywhere.
everything. Yes,
Yeah,
people don't realize that, and that, yeah, you and sometimes, yeah, and I'm glad you pointed out because, yeah, sometimes you hear the story that people they start doing stupid stuff, they start playing with the Ouija board, or they start just being at the wrong place at the wrong time. Like they kind of stumble into it, or they do stupid stuff and they invite it. But sometimes things happen or follow you that kind of you're innocent in the sense of you just become a target for some reason. They see some vulnerability either in you or your family unit, and they they can't come right in, but they try to trick their way into getting a foothold inside the household. And then that's when you start getting the weird little phenomena, and then you hear well, in this case that you just described, man, that went from 0 to 60 in a very short time.
yeah, they really did. And my dogs, what I love about them too is I have other spirits of dogs here that we've owned
Mm-hmm.
that lived with us for many years here, and then we had to, they passed on. We had to put them
Right.
down. They got sick or whatever, and we hear them come in and out of the doggy door all the time. And people will say to me, "Well, probably the wind did it." But like Sharon, we had one mastiff that used to like to sneak into the bathroom when she's doing her makeup and stick his nose right in her butt and startle her. And I hear her all the time in the bathroom make that little cry out. And
Uh-huh.
then later on, I'll go, "Was that Henry in there sticking his nose in your butt again?" She goes, "Yeah, he popped in there again."
Yeah.
But my dogs will see things running around. Their
Yes.
tails will wag, their heads will follow it, they'll play. But sometimes they come running in from the backyard through the doggy door like they are on fire. And as soon as they
Yes.
launch through the doggy door, they spin right back around and they stand there and they stare at the doggy door like
Uh-huh.
the next thing that comes through that is getting his head ripped off.
Right. Like this is.
And they won't move, and
Uh-huh.
they got the mohawk hair down the back, and
Yes.
and they're just staring right at the doggy door. And I know something out there messed with them because they're in the yard. I hear all the time what sounds like and I have outdoor cats, so it's always
Mm-hmm.
alarming to me. It sounds like a feral cat
Yeah.
being ripped apart by wild dogs. Nobody can hear it but me. And at first, I used to think I was going crazy. I could walk out there, and
Right.
in the dark, I'm looking 10 feet away into some bushes,
Okay.
and I'm hearing it. I turn on the flashlight. There's nothing there, but I'm hearing that. And I always have to go out and
Oh.
check because what if it's one of my cats?
Right.
And
Right. No, I know what you're
usually
thinking of. Yeah.
they're usually in the front yard, sound asleep
Mm-hmm.
in their carriers, and I check on that too. But it's just uh, that's that's an alarming thing to hear in the middle of the night because you just
Oh
never know.
hell.
And you got to go
Yes.
check.
Of
You have
course.
to go
Of
check.
course. When you have animals, but it's really funny though. When you have animals, depending of course what kind of animals, you know what's the normal noises that they make. You know and almost you would like, well, and that is a very disturbing noise, by the way, what you're describing. Um, what was it? God, I read somewhere about that, a haunting that had that type of that exactly what you're describing, Sean. I just can't remember what the details are. To remember reading, I was going, man, that's pretty scary.
I
It's like,
also
oh,
feel very guilty because sometimes we have workers come over here to do stuff. You're not going to get anybody over here if you tell them, listen, I just want to warn you ahead of time. I
no,
live in a
forget
little
it.
bit of a weird house. Don't be weird. Don't get weirded out on me. I'm here.
Yeah,
I'll help you any way I can. But if anything weird happens, because they'll go, what do you mean? I even have to
right.
take the magnets off my van that are in my driveway because they'll come up and see they'll go, dude, what's that mean on your van? Ghost be gone. And I have to explain. They'll go, listen, I'm going to call my supervisor and I got something else, another appointment I'm late for. They'll come and they won't come in and work. And I had recently
I
had
believe
to,
it.
workers had incidents here and I feel bad afterwards that I wasn't honest with them. But if I say something ahead of
Yeah,
time,
and then you think, okay, what's real? What's their imagination? Because they're already predisposed that if you told them something, that they're gonna be like, and maybe it wasn't
so
anything.
I
What
was
happens?
honest with one guy once, and here he is giving me a speech in my kitchen about ghosts don't exist, and you're just ripping people
Oh,
off doing that. I go, well, I don't even charge for my ministry work. He goes, but you get donations, I'm sure, after you help on cases and stuff, and maybe you'll write a book and get famous one day, or
uh huh.
get on a TV show. But it's all such a joke. And as he's saying that, all of a sudden he just stops talking and he gives me this weird look and he looks down at his arm and his arm looks like all of a sudden chicken skin and the hairs are all up on end and he's like pale and he looks back at me again and he says, you know what, I don't feel very good. And he waits a few more seconds. He goes, you know what, I'm going to go outside and get a breath of fresh air. Now he's been in and out of that front door 20 times getting tools, getting materials. The doorknob is unlocked and the deadbolt's off. He goes to the front door and the door will not open for him. He starts to really panic. And I finally yell out, I go, everybody, this is a good guy. You're scaring him to death. Let him get outside and do what he's got to do. He turns the doorknob, it opens up. He went to his truck. I heard the truck start up. I
I was
never
gonna say
saw
he
him.
left.
He did.
I knew
And
it. I knew it.
I had to finish the work by myself, and then I
Yeah.
have a plumber outside doing some sprinkler work, and there's oleander bushes all around him, and I'm
Uh
out there
huh.
with him the whole time because my pool is empty, and I got thrown in my pool one time by something back there, and that hurt. And I didn't want the same thing to happen to him. I didn't want to tell him, but
Right.
I'm standing behind him, so if he gets thrown, he's going to get hit me first. But he's
Yeah.
got to be back there and fix this. I got a flood in my backyard.
Okay.
Sprinkler broke, a pipe broke underneath. We had to dig it up and find it and replace it.
Right.
So he's working, and all of a sudden he just stops and he looks over to his left and he's staring right into these bushes and he's just staring and staring. I don't say anything. Like, dude, what's wrong? He's just staring into the bushes. And then all of a sudden, he slowly stands up and he continues to stare into the bushes. And then he all of a sudden backs up 2 steps real quick and continues to stare into the bushes. And then his head follows something to the left. He looks to the left and then he whips it back to me and looks at me. And I don't say a word. I just looking down at the ground.
Yeah.
And he goes, dude. I go, what? He goes, did you hear that? I go, no. What are you talking about? I really didn't hear anything.
Right. Right.
He goes, there's somebody standing right in that bush talking to me.
Oh my God,
I'm
Sean.
all, come on, dude. There's nobody out there. Dude, there's somebody standing in that bush talking to me. And then he walked off, and I watched it. What I heard, hearing where he walked off, I watched that walk through the bush. You didn't hear that? I go, no. I go, dude, the acoustics in this neighborhood are weird, and it's probably my neighbor on the other side of the wall or out in the front
Yeah.
yard.
Just but don't leave. Whatever
He
you do, don't leave.
instantly opens the gate, looks out in the front yard, instantly jumps up on his ladder and looks over my neighbor's wall and goes, dude, there's nobody around here. You didn't hear that. I go, I really didn't. But we're so close to getting done, man. Here, let's just
Come down.
finish.
Like, don't worry. I'm here
But
with you. I'll hold your
so
hand.
then what I felt really bad about was he finally, I forgot one sign on my car, and it was on the back because I went and grabbed the two off the sides. I forgot
Okay.
I had a sign on the back of the van.
Uh-huh.
and he's out there washing his hands right at the back of the van, and I see him looking at the back of my van, and I walk outside,
And
and he
the
just
wheels are going round and round thinking, oh God.
I walk outside, I don't say anything, and he just stands up, turns the water off, and he just stands there and stares at me for about a minute. I'm looking at him. I'm like, you okay? He goes, dude, why'd you do that to me? I go, what'd I do? He points to the back of my car and goes, you're a freaking Ghostbuster.
Yeah, and he's like, thanks.
I
He,
forgot I even had a Ghostbuster
and you know
bumper
what? He
sticker on our
probably
bumper.
thought you were probably lying that you hadn't heard anything. He was probably thinking, yeah, he did, and he's just not, you know.
I gave him a hug and said, listen, man, I gave him an extra big tip, too. I said, thank you for not running off, dude. Yeah, I live in a haunted home. But I couldn't tell you that ahead of time because would you have stayed? He said, hell no. So, we are the weird old people in the neighborhood that everybody knows we live in a weird home.
Well,
So
the
no
thing
one
is, this is like
trick or
that
treat.
you get the people that don't believe, but just in case, I'm not gonna work here.
On Halloween, I'll tell you, the it's funny. We have to put our dogs in two cages and lock them in there because they always want to eat strangers. But Sharon stands by the door and waits to see the kids coming up, and will open the door ahead of time, not to startle them, but to meet them out on the little right outside the front door with the big huge tray of candy. We don't know why we do that because it just saves them ringing the doorbell or knocking, and it's
Right.
really the dogs through the roof. But they don't even the kids don't even they everybody knows who we are and about the house, and it's always the
I bet.
parents. The kids are down on the sidewalk with their bags, and the parents are out the door getting the candy from
That's so
us.
funny.
And sometimes the parents won't even come up. We'll watch, and they'll get to the driveway. There's a little family discussion down there, and then the whole group moves on to the next
Yeah,
house.
it's like I'm surprised you haven't had anybody from the neighborhood, Sean, come over and ask for help for anything that
The
they've
whole
been.
the whole neighborhood's haunted. Yeah,
I
there's
was
been
about to say, is it one of those
yeah.
areas that?
During a time where I was getting a lot of what I refer to as paranormal drive-bys at my house, my neighbor's house to the left caught on fire. And I don't want to believe it was connected to what was happening in my home, but I felt guilty about that. And then we've had deaths in the two homes directly across the street from us,
Okay.
and a death in the home two over from the house to the right. But the people in the right were experiencing stuff because what happened in that home, like you said earlier, transferred over to that property. So we've had neighbors come and ask us for help with
Okay.
things, and it's just one of those neighborhoods. And
Yeah.
we didn't know that when we moved in.
Oh no, of course.
We get accused all the time of we brought it. Even at our work, both of our workplaces are haunted, and Sharon and I get accused of having brought those ghosts to the workplace all the time. And maybe we did, maybe we didn't. We always say, can't say we did or we didn't, but
Sometimes people
uh,
have no idea the land. Sometimes even the developers, even the people that originally bought the land and develop it, sometimes they themselves. It's not that they're being untruthful. Sometimes they themselves don't know the history of what's been
absolutely,
on there, especially if whatever happened was maybe before the town actually became incorporated. Where nowadays you do everything, it's got to be recorded in the town hall or whatever, city hall.
yeah,
Sometimes things, and then people forget, and by the time somebody actually takes the land over to develop it, nobody remembers or knows. Maybe they had a small cemetery or stuff happened out there. Who knows? Who
I thought
knows?
I thought it was a law that like real estate developers or like a real estate agent had to let a family know that the home that I'm about to show you is rumored to be haunted. I thought they had to divulge that, but like here in Vegas, they don't have to.
I know that
So
they've
I
got different rules, I think, for different states, and some of them you have to volunteer. Other times you have to if the person asks.
Well,
Uh,
here they don't have to say anything, and I've had
okay.
any real estate agents reach out to me and say, "Listen, I'm trying to sell this home. It's going to really make me a lot of money, but every time I bring someone in there,
Mm-hmm.
some weird things happen and scare the buyers off. Can you look into it for me?"
Yeah.
I go, "Do you have to divulge that to the clients?" They go, "Well, one, I don't have to because things happen that just scare them off. But two,
Yes.
no, it's not a law here. We don't have to say anything." So I'm like, "Well, that's kind of unfair."
Yeah, and in some states it's not the haunting, but if there's been like a murder or like a crime, like a not not a violent crime, not in the sense of, but if there's a death, as in a murder, yes, they have to disclose. It's really weird. Each state has their own rules. And in some, it's only if they're asked, and some you don't have to, and in some you absolutely have to. But now that you mentioned that thing about not selling, many years ago, I worked with a girl. She was in her 20s, I was in my 20s, and she's telling me the story how she was engaged to get married, and her fiance had bought a townhouse. Brand new, by the way. Brand new townhouse. But they break up. They don't go through with the marriage. She stays in the townhouse. She says it was a little 2-story townhouse. And one day she was someplace with a couple of her friends, and they ran across this guy who was a Santeria priest. And apparently that day they were having it was a big celebration of some type of, it was like a special significant date. So he invites her and her friends. She says she had never practiced it. I mean, so her and her friends, they go on a goof. Oh, you want to go? Yeah, let's go. Let's see what happens, right? Yeah. So they go there. They hang out. They watch everything. They haven't been there. Oh, okay. But then after a while, they're like, okay, it was like on a weekend. We want to keep going. So they go to him and they say, look, we're going to leave. And he's like, no, don't leave. Because apparently he was the one that was having this shindig. So he really couldn't pay that much attention to her. And he said, no, give me a chance. Don't leave. She says. And then a couple of times later, he kind of told them. And at the end, they were like, man, we want to leave. Like, okay, we've been here a while. We checked everything out. We're ready to leave. Like, this is not, our curiosity has been sated. Thanks. Yeah. So she says that the last time that she tells him, hey, I'm leaving. And he got really mad. He got upset. But she says, I'm leaving. They left. And she says that at that time she lived alone when she had a dog in the house. And she says that her dog all of a sudden would sit at the bottom of the stairs and start barking and barking and barking and barking. Anyway, to make a long story short, she says that after, it progressively got worse to where she realized that he had sent a spirit after her. And she says that at the beginning she would be like, what's wrong with the dog? And she would put him outside. But he would not go upstairs. He had never had a problem going upstairs to the bedroom with her. And then he started refusing and would just sit at the bottom of the stairs and bark. To the point that she was going crazy. And then she says that, first she says she would get a feeling like, say she was doing the dishes downstairs and she would feel like she's being watched. But she's alone. She would turn around, there's nobody there. And she says that that she would be falling asleep and she would hear somebody whispering to her. Like when you're falling asleep, that you kind of hear something going on. But she couldn't make out what it was. And the first couple of times that it happened, she thought that I'm kind of dreaming. But then it started happening more and more often. And it progressed. And she says that feeling of getting watched started getting worse. And then she started having some nightmares. And she says a couple of times she felt like, when somebody sits down on your bed, like you feel the pressure on the mattress. Yeah. And she started even thinking, she says also that feeling of being watched got more and more often. She says, Marlene, I was thinking I'm losing my mind. She wasn't thinking paranormal. She wasn't thinking ghost. She was thinking, I'm losing my mind. She says it got to the point where that feeling of being watched, it was happening to her even when she was outside of the house. Okay. Wow. And that's what she says, that I was afraid to tell my mom and my sister. They're going to look at me and go, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Again, she's still not thinking ghost, paranormal, nothing like that. She says that one night she is in bed again and she feels again the pressure of somebody lying down next to her. And she says that she reached basically what you described, that lady, somebody behind her. And she says she reached out with her hand and she touched somebody in the bed with her. She says that she got up, grabbed her, some clothes, her dog, and went to her sister. Her sister was married, and slept on the floor next to her sister, on her sister's side of the bed with a light on. And finally, that's when funny? Go ahead.
People are listening to you and laughing, and I even have a big smile on my face. But you know what? People don't understand how frightening it is to have a paranormal experience, even just like that. It may seem minor to you because it didn't happen to you, but it's frightening. And it was worth her to get up in the middle of the night, grab her dog, and go to her married sister's home in the middle of the night
Right.
and sleep on her floor.
On the floor. She
Rather
made
than
her put the light on.
Yeah.
She made her put now. And what's really funny now, and this is the thing when you mentioned, she says that she had put the house up for sale, the townhouse. It was a brand new townhouse. She had been planning to sell it anyway. It wasn't because of that. It was like after the breakup, she had just decided I'm going to sell it because she was going to sell it. She says that she couldn't sell it. She just couldn't sell it. She would have people that would come by, or people, stuff would just fall through the. She just couldn't
Spirits,
sell it.
they make it. They make it so it won't sell.
So
They do.
at the
I
end,
don't know how they do that.
They do it. So finally, of course, she fesses up. She tells her sister. She tells her mom. Blah blah blah. This has been happening. All these months have gone by, and this has just been getting worse and worse. And so I think it was. I don't know if it was a friend of her mom's or a friend of her sister's. A friend of a friend. One of those. Somebody there was a spiritualist. Okay, and they said, have her come over. We're going to have a mass, and you know that spiritualists, what they do is they'll channel. And basically, they did like a mass, and one of them channeled. And basically, what it was a man. It was a spirit of a man. That later on, it turns out that guy, the Santero, had sent to her because he was mad at her that she had left. Apparently, he was romantically interested, even though he had just met her. And he says he didn't realize that he was dead. And he says, I just want to be with her. I'm not going to hurt her. I want to be with her. And, they were like, but you're dead. He didn't understand that he was dead. And by the way, she was a very pretty girl. She was real pretty. She had long hair, in her 20s. He wanted to be with her. He couldn't understand, So basically, they kind of clarified it for him, like, you're dead.
Yeah.
You're earthbound. And they moved him on. And then the she says, pray and everything. She says that like within a couple of weeks, Sean, the house sold. Once that got done, okay, and she hadn't changed the price. She hadn't changed real estate agents. She hadn't done any of that. And for all these months that she had been going through this thing, that house had not sold. A townhouse, which by the way, it was brand new. It was a brand new townhouse that had been built in a new development. Once that was done, and people can think, well, how could this spirit, whatever, influence the sale of a house? But it could.
Well, you hear the old saying, when in Rome, and you hear a lot of paranormal teams will advise clients, don't make a bargain with anything. They need to go.
Yes.
Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And this one real estate friend of mine couldn't get this mansion to sell. Mm-hmm. And I said, listen, you're going to finally have to go in there and sit. It was the female matriarch of the family that lived most of her adult life in there and died in the home. And she didn't want to let this home go. Mm-hmm. I said, you're going to have to go in there and sit down with her as though she's sitting at the table with you and have a one-on-one discussion with her and tell her, listen, if you don't find something you like about somebody that I bring in here, they're going to bulldoze this home down and make it a parking lot. And who knows what will happen to you then. But I on my side of the bargain, I will do my best to try and find someone in here that knows that you're here and are okay with it if you're okay with them, and then you just cohabitate and don't scare them or don't make life miserable for them. Sure enough, the next really nice couple that he was honest with, he brought in there, she didn't act up at all. And in fact, she visited him, the real estate agent, later and let him know that I accept these people. Right. And I'm good with these. I'm good with them. I'm good with it. And they had no problem. The house sold.
Yeah. Yeah. And people don't think, well, how could that happen? How can they affect the sale of a house? And you've heard, I'm sure you've heard of people that will go to houses that when they have great curb appeal, and then when they walk into it, it's just something about the place that they're like, no, I'm out of here.
Because they get on you. The spirit, he puts his funk on you and makes you just feel ill. And like, I can't be in this home. It might even just be that minor of a thing, just to invade your bubble and just settle in on you. And you just like this, I am just this place, I can't put my finger on it, but this place creeps me out. No one's going to buy a home like that.
No, no. But the flip side of it is, let's just play devil's advocate. I have heard of a lot of stories of people that have, when they were telling the stories, that they ended up in a haunting situation, and they'll describe that when they went to see this property, they fell in love with it. They thought, oh my God, I really love this place. It's almost like it enticed them.
Yeah.
And everything is wonderful and cozy, and then all of a sudden it just got really dark, and it was like that. The flip side of that, it wanted to bring them in. And usually you'll see this a lot with properties that have been vacant for a while. It's almost like they want the human in there, or humans in there.
And and it's funny you say that. I know situations where there were several human spirits in a home, and they were kind of being held there captive by a darker entity.
Yes.
The humans wanted more humans in there, and maybe thought that would help them and push this other thing out. And that other thing just kind of waited, lying waiting. And when the family moved in, now it was that thing that was tormenting them, but not the human spirits.
Yes. It's kind of weird sometimes that there's almost like a pecking order, even in the spiritual side.
Yeah.
Where because think about it. If you think about it, Sean, if you have a non-human entity, not only are you tormenting the living, can you imagine if you're holding back a human soul from being in the presence of the divine? You've got it trapped here, earthbound. Talk about, like, man, you're really doing a good job. You're messing with the living, and you've got these human souls trapped where they're outside the presence of being with God, of moving to be where you should be. And it's like, I've got everything under control here. That they do that.
Yeah.
They
do.
That.
It's I hate to say amazing, but I can't, I don't know how they're able to do that. And it's, we're going to know all the answers one day, but I'm still learning, and I'll be learning until the day I die. And I still see things that amaze me, that make my jaw drop every day.
But yeah. And one of the things and that we talked about it was that sometimes I want to use the word romanticize, because in Hollywood land sometimes they make it feel like it's desirable to be involved, like in one of these. If it's a haunting, it's got to be a demonic haunting, and I think sometimes people don't realize just how dark and devastating that could be. If that
you
happens
wish
to you.
if you ever run into a severely you enter in a demonically infested home, or you're in the presence of somebody that's really oppressed, or a family that's been tormented by the demonic, you wish it was just a ghost.
Right, exactly.
You wish it was 100 ghosts, just a bunch of Aunt Bees and Uncle Toms that are hanging around watching over the home and the family. You wish it was 100 of those.
Or even if it was the old owner of the house and was a cranky old man, that just doesn't want to doesn't want anybody living there. It's like, okay, well, just that's different.
Yeah, just don't go into the attic because Uncle Tom's up there. You'll smell the smoke, and if you go up there, he's going to throw something at you. But as long as you stay out of the attic, you'll wish it was 100 of those.
Yes.
Than one demonic entity.
Yes.
Encounter, because it's just so much. It's off the charts.
Let me ask you something, Sean, and I want you to touch on this because we've been around. You and me are comparable in age, and I think we've both seen the progression, and that's why I wanted to touch base on it. Where, like you said, back in the 70s when The Exorcist came out, that everybody just totally wigged out. Whether you were religious or not, everybody was like, the devil. But nowadays, there's so many shows, and by this, I'm not prudish. I'm not one of these people like that. But I think there's so many shows that are too dark and very subtly dark, where they kind of draw teenagers or people that are just not discerning into thinking that either dabbling in Satanism or dark magic or whatever, it's kind of like, wow, cool. And I'm thinking, God, I'm going to use the word dangerous. I mean, I don't want to be over dramatic, but it's dangerous.
Well, as dark as some of those shows are, you're right. To some people, it romanticizes it in some weird, bizarre way. And so it does make them dangerous.
Yes. And I think that by the time they realize that this is not what they saw on the show and they want to backpedal on it, it's, I don't want to say it's too late, but in a way, yeah, then that's, I guess, when you get a call. Like, help.
I wake up every morning. Well, I say prayers every night before I go to bed, but among the prayers that I say when I wake up in the morning, one is that I never have to work another demonic case as long as I live.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, then at least I know they're on they're on the down low, or somebody much better than me and much more knowledgeable than me is those cases are going to them instead.
Right.
And
yeah, they are. Yeah. And we talked about it briefly. You know, I don't want to, you know, for you to give away everything in your book, but we talked about, you talk about people that get, oppressed, obsessed, or possession, or the perfect possession, which is the person willingly allows, and sometimes they could go, they do horrible things and they act normal. They don't do all those things that people think of as the possessed person. Yeah. And they just wreak havoc, whether they kill people, they do so many sadistic things because they're perfectly possessed, but they've learned enough to kind of act normal. Or sometimes, I want to say, sometimes they purposely get a prestigious either position or something so that they're never suspected when they've done something horrible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There are a bunch of those running around.
Yeah, you're right. It's a legion. It's its own army. They've got their own different ranks, and they're assigned different territories, and there's different levels of them, and they're all in cahoots together. I mean, one of the reasons why I wrote the book was because I worked after Sharon had her attack, and while I was fighting that, it was like the next 9 cases in a row.
Okay.
Here I go 40 years without one demonic case, and now not only is my wife fighting for her life as a result of a demonic attack, but now all these cases are being thrown at me. But looking back, I realized that there was a span of time there where all these cases, 8 or 9 of them in a row, all of the clients either knew each other either professionally or personally, and I was the one being brought in on every case. And it ultimately came full circle back to the original client that started it all, who's now dying of cancer. But I believe, my theory was that they ran in a pack, and it was all ultimately already in the cards, that it was meant to happen for me to work all of these, leading to my first severe attack, which I actually left the field. I was done. I told God, I'm not, if you created me to do this, I beg your forgiveness, but I can't handle it. I'm done. I'm done. And it took a pastor friend of mine to call me about a year later and say, I've got this case that you absolutely have to help me on. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. I love you, but I'm not doing it. And she begged and begged and begged. But it was on that case that I had a vision of the Holy Spirit. Okay. And that let me know that I didn't tell her at the time, but she was driving home from the case on the freeway. And when I told her what I had seen while we were there, she actually had to pull over on the side of the freeway and was dancing around her car. She's like, here I am, a pastor for 20 years, and I've prayed to have a vision of the Holy Spirit once in my life, and here you get it on this paranormal case.
The person I had to drag into this.
Yeah, so, that was a clear sign to me that they had my back. Yeah. And I didn't have to worry about it. And then the very next case was the one with that kid, and the single mother. So just when you think it's, you're in that quicksand, and you're gonna die, and there's no one out there to save you, God will always reach an olive branch out to you, something for you to reach up and grab a hold of and pull yourself. Yes. If you just grab a hold of the branch, he'll pull you out of the quicksand. But you have to wholeheartedly, in your heart, your soul, and your whole entity and essence, have to totally submit and ask for forgiveness and give yourself over to God in those situations, and He'll save you. But if you don't, even if you don't believe in God and believe in the devil and all that, you find yourself in that situation, I'm telling you, you better believe in something real quick, because the alternative
Yeah, well,
is
it's
not
that
what you
moment
want.
of perfect trust, okay,
Yeah.
where you are going to have to trust with no guarantees. In other words, because let's face it, as human beings, we always want the guaranteed outcome.
Yeah.
No guarantees. You're going to have to imperfect trust, and I think that's really um, where things happen that maybe before, you know, that whatever that changes in our spirit or our mind, our emotions that make things happen, as far as, like I said, the right person comes to you, the help you need, somebody reaches out to you, the right person that they need to help them out of that situation.
Well, for all the people out there that are listening that have gone through this, I want you to also remember something else. You're still not alone, and many people like me in this field, we know that it's not over for you. That we're going to go through what we call PTDD, post traumatic demonic disorder,
Mm-hmm.
for the rest of your life. So don't shut off. And you got to keep the lines of communication open with whether it's the person that came to help you or other people that you've brought into your life that helped you, or people that you're going to confession every Saturday and
Right,
mass,
exactly.
receiving Holy Communion every Sunday, and you've met people in that church group. Whoever these new people are, you got to keep them in your lives and keep
Yes.
them close to you. And if you're having issues, you've got to talk about it and continue to open up.
Almost
No
like
one's
group
gonna,
therapy, yeah.
yeah, no one's gonna laugh at you.
Mm-mm.
And if somebody does laugh at you because you say, well, guess what? It's funny you bring that up. I was possessed once and had to have an exorcism done on me. If anybody laughs at you, then you just take names and cross them off your Christmas gift list and move on, because they're not the people you want in your life. The people you
Right.
want in your life are the ones that are going to go, for real? I mean, you're not just kidding me, for real? And give you a big hug and a kiss and say, do you want to talk about it?
Yeah.
And share your story with these people, because they need to know what happened and
Yes.
how you were delivered from that, and how they can prevent it from happening to them. Your story is just as important as me telling the story.
Yeah. And I'm gonna give a perfect example. Like last week, my youngest son, he participated in it's a Catholic church, a retreat that they have for just men. It's called EMIS, and basically it's like a weekend retreat. And his dad has participated. Even his grandfather has participated. Worked with that group for many many years. And let me tell you something. Those people talk about it. In other words, once you make that connection with, let's say, that group setting, first of all, there's a non-disclosure. Nobody talks about what you guys talk about in there, okay? But these people, that group of people, become like a source of help for you. It doesn't only have to be a paranormal situation. It
Yeah.
could be things just that happen to you in your life. And if that person knew that at one point you had a situation where, let's say, you underwent an exorcism, for lack of a better word, you know, it's like, okay, worst case scenario, that's almost like this person might know stuff about you that even your own family doesn't know that occurred to you. And there's other things that you can work with this group on once you develop that relationship with them, that basically that they can help you out. It doesn't always just have to be the paranormal angle as far as getting help.
And don't worry about finding yourself feeling alone. I haven't lost any friends, but I live a very I go to work. I worked part time at an animal hospital. Sharon's an office manager at the same animal hospital days. I go in there a few nights a week and help the place close. But once we really, and she's a Stephen minister through the Lutheran Church.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got on those paths and started working the cases that we work now, the friends dropped off. They all still know us. They all
Right.
still love us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we're in their prayers.
Right.
But it's pretty heavy duty. And you have to understand that too. For some people,
Yeah.
what you do can be pretty heavy duty. And
Yes.
to cope with it, they need to distance themselves from you a little bit. It's not that they hate you.
All right.
They don't want to be your friend anymore. They don't love you anymore. But Sharon and I have realized that over the years it's basically just Sharon and I now. When
Yeah.
once it was we ran in a pack of a
Right.
lot of very close friends, and they're still our close friends,
Yes.
but they don't come over anymore. They don't call as much,
Yes.
and it is what it is. They don't want to hear the stories because it freaks them out.
Well, let's face it.
And
If it's again, it's not the movie. If let's say they hear you, they're gonna believe you, Sean. They're gonna say they're gonna know
well, you
this
know
is
how many
real.
so many of them have reached out to me saying, "I want you to know I bought your book today. I'm not going to read it ever, but I bought it because I love you and I know how hard you worked on it. It took you through the lifetime in the making, and then
Right.
finally, when I finally got a message from Spirit. This story needs to be told. It
Mm-hmm.
was 3 years of literally putting my blood, sweat, and tears down through pen to paper to get this done. They respect that and they bought it for that reason.
Yeah.
But many of them said, I don't ever plan to read it, but it's on the
Right.
shelf.
Because
And
I know this is.
congratulations.
In other words, if it was anybody else on the author, I could say, "Oh, they're BSing. God, who knows? They're exaggerating." But since I know it's you, I know this is the truth, and I don't want to read that stuff.
I don't even want to read the book. I haven't read it. Since I finished it, I haven't read it.
Well, it's like
I had to dig so deep and rip some old scabs off of some old wounds and revisit some things that I didn't even know I didn't want to revisit until I was there. And then it was too late.
yes,
And it's not any, gosh, I'm so jealous of you. I don't know how many successful paranormal podcasts you do, but you've written so many books. I'm honored that you asked me to
no, on the contrary,
forward on your supernatural safety book, which is great.
yes,
But
yes.
I don't know how you do it because this took so much out of me. I don't know if I could ever do another one.
Let me tell you something. I'll be when I'm writing. Sometimes I put it off. I'll think, I need to get started on this. So I could work on it little by little. You start getting that, and then I kind of put it off because it's almost like once you get focused in it, it's like, don't bother me. Don't. Are you gonna eat? No. No.
You're done. You're
Yeah.
done. Like Sharon was having to remind me to go take a shower and bring
Yes.
food to me
Because
because
it's like you lose that train of thought, or if I get,
yeah,
and it's true, especially when you're talking about stuff that's happened to you, even though sometimes it's not, like you said, and this is the thing people don't realize, when you start seeing something in your mind, your body does not realize that it's not reality. In other words, that you're just remembering something. And if it's something that caused you distress, you start getting, you start sometimes hyperventilating, sweating. You start having the same reaction you had when that episode was going on. Your body doesn't know that it's just up here. So you could get, you basically stress out,
yeah.
as a result of it. Because you relive it, especially if it was something along the lines of what you were talking about. Like when that kid, God, that's hats off to you, Sean. I'm not kidding. I think
I
I
mean,
would have said,
you also remember things that have nothing to do with what you're writing about. It's like
yeah,
I remember one night. I just remembered I spent many years just a raging alcoholic and drug addict, and I remember just one night coming home after being gone for days, doing God knows whatever, and middle of the night, and there's my dad. I don't even want to start talking about it, I get emotional, but there's my dad waiting up for me in the middle of the night to have this long drawn out talk with me about just life. Didn't ridicule me for my drug abuse, didn't ridicule my friends, didn't ridicule nothing, just wanted to talk, and that talk saved my life.
yeah, yes. Sometimes everything pivots sometimes on one event or one conversation. Yes, I absolutely agree
So
with
that
you.
had nothing to do with the book, but those things happen when you're writing, and you go, "Oh my God,
Hmm.
can't believe I'm back there again," and then you wonder, "Shit, did I even?" I'm sorry, I just cussed,
No,
but
it's fine.
did I remember to thank Dad for that
Right.
before you passed?
That, yeah, that you think like, and of course you're seeing this now in hindsight for the value, the true value of what that conversation was about, you
Yeah.
know. But sometimes you only have that vantage point, like you said, when years have gone by, and you look back and you go, God, what if I wouldn't have had that person or that parent or whoever to have that conversation with me?
Yeah. Absolutely.
It's yeah, a lot of things sometimes it's just that one event that basically is can take you off the road that you're on and put you on something else. And in your case, uh and let me tell you something, Sean. I think that, and I haven't finished reading the book. For a lot of people, sometimes they think that if they've been very wayward in their life, like you said, whether it's drugs or alcohol or just running with the wrong crowd, some people think, oh, what's the use? That's it. Like, I'm forsaken. And people don't realize that there's never that point where you could,
Oh,
it's too late.
I'm glad you brought that up because I want people to know I spent many years and did a lot of some of the things I write about in the book. A lot of the paranormal experiences while I was an alcoholic and a drug
Mm-hmm.
abuser. Did I maybe just imagine some of those things? Perhaps.
Right.
I don't think so. Because I knew from the age of like 10 that I had a gift, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew my mother was gifted. I knew my sisters were gifted. I knew my father came from a long line of warriors for Christ. I knew all that. So, um, but you know what I how I stopped? Even when I met Sharon, 15. We've been married for almost 17 years now. I was a raging alcoholic when Sharon and I met. You
Yeah.
know how I stopped?
Oh.
I just finally got on my knees one day, and I just it's like the quicksand. You may think you're about to die, and all the stuff you've done, there's no way God's
Mm-hmm.
gonna help you out of this one because you don't deserve it.
Right.
But if you really, with every fiber of your being, give up and you mean it, that you're done, and all you
Yes.
need is for them to intervene in your life at that moment and help you stop, you'll get the help. And I swear to you, I woke up the next morning and I've never had a drink since.
Yeah. And that's that. It happened. People. So I think that some people think like they, like you said, it's just too many things have happened, or I've done too many things, and this is it. I'm
Ghosts,
damned.
yeah,
Yeah.
ghosts. They say ghosts do that sometimes. They're afraid of judgment. There's no judgment. Go to the
Yes.
light.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And that's a whole nother show. I'll tell you that
That's
much.
another show. And people tell me all the time, well, I have every intent, I have every intention when I pass to stay back and haunt, and I'm trying
Why
to
would you
help.
do that? Like, why would you
Why?
do that?
Come back in visitation, but I guarantee you,
Yeah.
man,
No.
enough of the people that I've had near-death experiences, and Sharon's one of them. Uh, Heaven's just too beautiful, and there's
Yes.
just to
People
not want to go there.
people don't know is if you are that stuck in between is a great place. You're out of the presence of the divine. You don't have a human body, so you really don't are not supposed to exist on this plane. It's a horrible existence for a soul that's trapped, a human soul that's trapped here, either by choice or because, you know, confusion or
I'm telling you, they're just waiting for you to sit down with them and talk. That was my
yeah,
mother's speech to me. You're going to see
yeah,
a lot of ghosts in your life. They're just people like us that don't have a body anymore. And if
yeah,
they appear to you, there's for a reason. Ask them if you can help. And if you can't, be honest and tell them you can't help them and to move
yeah,
on.
yeah,
But if you can help them, try. But the spirit
yes.
sometimes just wants to hear a living person say, guess what? I'm sorry to be the one to have to tell you this. In case you don't know, you're
You're
dead.
dead. You're dead.
And that
Yeah.
light you're so afraid of, I'm going to say a prayer for you and bring some
Yes.
angelic beings down to escort
Yes.
you there. But all your family and friends are waiting for you over there. That's where you need to go. Your time here is done. There's no more you
Yes.
can contribute to anyone here now in this dimension. Your time here is done.
Right.
That's all they need to hear from you, and then they'll move on and let
Right.
them know there's no judgment.
Right.
Um, you know,
There's that, and this is the thing is, and some of them it's like, people say, well, if it's a ghost, yeah, you do not sometimes have to state the obvious, which is exactly what you said. You're dead, and you're like,
yeah,
yeah, because a lot of them they kind of suspect it, and either in denial, because some people either they died or didn't want to die, or they really truly for a lot of reasons they just don't understand that they're self-aware, but that they don't have a physical body anymore. They just
Yeah.
they can't make that connection, and they're still trying to figure out why doesn't anybody see them, why doesn't anybody talk to them. They kind of like that total, and sometimes I want to say that even though I don't think in that area there's linear, time as we know it. It's almost like they kind of, a little bit as time goes by, they kind of forget almost, but they just know they're miserable because they're
Yeah.
unhappy. Because let's face it, this is a human soul, and this is not the place for you to be.
And they do say the longer a lot of people say,
Yes.
I don't want you to get rid of the ghosts in my home. I'm cool with them.
Oh no.
The longer they hang around,
Yes.
the sadder and angrier they get, and they
Yes.
sometimes do then become malevolent
Yes.
20 years down the road, and
Yes.
then they take it out on you.
Yes.
You need to move on.
Yeah, you could do that. It's people don't realize, and you tell them, peace be with you. You need to go into the light. And all your answers, forgiveness, light, everything that you're looking for is going to be there. And like I tell everybody, sometimes you all have the most appropriate person will come for them, whether it's a parent or a child or a family or a friend, somebody that they trust,
Yeah.
is going to come for them and lure them over, because sometimes there's a lot of different personalities. People sometimes they lived being scared, and even when they're dead, they still kind of have that scared personality.
Yeah.
So they have to be coaxed over into the other side. But anyway, Sean, it has been absolutely wonderful to talk to you. I'm going to have
Now, you and I have to always look at the clock when we talk, because
I know.
we could easily just,
Absolutely.
do interviews that people don't, a series of them. People don't even want to tune in. They're like, oh, Marlene and Sean are together again. Let me go have dinner first.
It's like,
And, take a
I'm
shower,
not kidding you.
relax. This is gonna be a while.
I did that. I had dinner before because I said, you know what? If I don't eat before, I'm going to be ready to chomp on somebody when I finish. Because
Absolutely.
But yeah, because and this is, and you know what, Sean? The thing is that we have actually had firsthand experiences, and we're not in it for the sensationalism. How's that? It's not the sensationalism, and there's a reality to it. And like you said, sometimes it's human spirits.
I
but
hope, I hope God, besides the obvious, I hope God really makes it clear to me, what's in it for me here. Not that I need anything to be in it, but I would love for Sharon. I'd love to. She's 16 years older than me. I'm going to be 60 in November, so she's 76 years old. I would love to, and she won't stop working. I would love for her to be able to retire. I would love to be able to retire too if the book sales do well enough. God forbid. Or, with God's help. So you say that I don't want to be on a TV show. I couldn't. I've got my dogs. I've got Sharon I need to take care of. I've got a home here. I don't want to. But it'd be nice if my soul is rich. My soul is satisfied with the help I give. But if at the same time you were able to in just the comforts of life, get a little help from wherever that help came from would be nice too.
Of course.
But I try not to make, I joke all the time. I say, God, listen, I promise you, if you just let me win the lottery once, I will give half my winnings, whatever they are, I'll give half my winnings to Catholic charities. Then I have to laugh and joke and tell them, I'm just joking. Because if all of a sudden that did happen, there's the temptation. Well, maybe I won't give half.
But yeah, I know. It's like, but and this is the thing, Sean. Sometimes you think about it and you say, well, sometimes you don't know what. Let's say you wrote this book now, and what we were talking about, and somebody reads this book. And us as human beings, especially if you're undergoing something along these lines, whether it's a haunting or something, some people isolate. And sometimes when you read a book and this person is describing what they went through, either to you, let's say personally, or somebody that you were involved in a case, and then all of a sudden they realize, man, I'm not the only one that this is happening to, and there is a way to resolve this. I just need to go get help. Okay, but you help somebody and you might never know about it. And some people will read it and they'll okay, interesting. But there's a lot of people that read this stuff and it's because they find themselves in this predicament. They just don't know how to get out of it. Okay.
And you may 20 years from now, I may be with Sharon, walking our dog in a park and
Mm-hmm.
bump into somebody to go, "Are you Reverend Sean Whittington?"
Yeah.
Well, guess what? 15 years ago, I stumbled upon your book in the library and wrote it,
Yes.
and this is what it did for me. And I tell you
Exactly.
right then, you're right. That makes it all worthwhile. Just
Right. And I
knowing
mean,
and
sometimes,
that
and you
probably
know,
does happen.
and sometimes you never. And but at the same time, let's call it by what it is, Sean. I mean, that's very altruistic, but we all need money to pay our bills to live, like you said, a life where, like you said, I've got my house, I've got my animals, but you know, you got to pay your bills. So whichever way you
Well, it's
can bring
also
in
something
money,
else you said earlier, just total trust. I have total trust in God
yes,
has a master plan
of
for me.
course,
And I don't, if I'm hungry, I can eat.
yeah,
If I'm tired, I have a comfortable bed to sleep on.
yes,
I know my wife loves me to death, my dogs love me to death, my family loves me to
yes,
death. I have a roof over my head.
mm-hmm.
Um, my car's falling apart, but I can get that fixed. I can take a bus to work, I can hitchhike to work. But
Uber,
we're alive, and
yeah,
I trust in that He does have a master plan, and
yes.
I'm helping. I'm trying to do my best to go along with whatever that plan is. I think He's got for me,
Yeah.
and
You
we'll
know
see where
what?
it goes.
Have you considered, Sean, considering that you work with animals, have you ever thought about doing a book about animal spirits and things like that?
You
And you
don't
mentioned something
know
about
how
having
many
a
projects I have that people have already said, just that alone would make a whole book. I probably, in many years from now, will write another one, and that's a big topic is the animal spirits because I didn't even realize on what scale it was until I was at a paranormal conference,
mm-hmm.
and a psychic that I didn't even know, who didn't even know me, walked up to me out of a crowd and said, "That's a first. I've never seen someone followed by as many spirit animals as you are. You
There you
have
go.
about 20 dogs around you." And that just made, I didn't want to die right then and pass over and see them all. But that made me feel so good knowing because
Yeah.
I can never remember not having a dog. I've had a
Mm-hmm.
dog since I was a little baby, and I was
Yeah.
always the one in the family that took care of him.
Yes.
I am going to be so happy if that's my heaven to just be
Yes.
around all the dogs that I've always ever owned, and we're
Yes.
just laying in a field without a care in the world.
Yes.
I'll be fine.
Yes. And
So
there's
I do that story planned and some other crazy ones.
I
Yeah,
mean, and there and but you know what? There's a dark side of it too. There's the what you said. What sometimes that you will have malevolent stuff personify in animals. I hate it when they take certain animals and they kind of like make them malevolent, like let's like a snake or this. But that I think sometimes you will have, especially if you're talking non-human entities or elementals, use certain noises or animals to personify, like what you described, those that cat in the bush, that crying thing, and that you also saw the dogs when the dark dogs, that there's sometimes a lot of myths around the black dog and things like that. Yeah, there's also a little darker side of the things with animals, and I've also heard of things, real dark hauntings, especially at places where there's been abattoirs or slaughterhouses,
yeah,
things like that. Places where it curses the land. It didn't
yeah.
happen to human beings, but it happened to animals. I mean, there's a whole, and I mean, it goes on off. It's a matter of fact, you know how they say certain places where people that are practicing dark magic, they'll gravitate to it, and nobody can figure out why. Sometimes it's because on that site there was some type of shedding of blood of animals, a lot,
Yes,
slaughterhouses and things like that. Um, and yeah, I mean, the impact of animals, positive and negative, it's there. Is there as far as even in the spirit form,
yes.
even in the spirit form. But yeah, I hope you do that book. But I understand totally what you mean as far as that once you decide to do it, it really is draining in the sense of time and mental, what goes up here to produce it, to translate it from what's up here into the written form. People don't realize what's really involved, you
Yeah, I
know.
don't know how you did it. Hats
No,
off to
let
you.
me tell you something. Yeah, unless you're like one of these, I mean, you look at some of these authors and you're like, man, I don't know how you do that. That they spit out the books very easily, and I guess it depends what point you're writing from. But yeah, I hope you put that book out because it sounds like you have a lot of experience on that level with the animal thing, and there's a lot of people out there that I don't know. Even they have even if they're not the biggest animal lovers, but they have some special link with a certain animal that they've had a pet. And some people have this connection, and once they lose that pet, they never again want another animal because they're so hurt when they lose that one pet.
Absolutely. I'm like that. But next thing you know, I'm
Yeah,
bringing another pet home.
yeah.
And then I'm so glad that I did. But yeah, every time I'm driving home from having to, I'm leaving the animal hospital because I just had to put one of my animals down. They got cancer or they got
Mm-hmm.
really badly injured, hit by a car, what have you.
Yes,
Couldn't be saved. Yeah, you're like, I'm done. I'm done. But
yes.
God, like I said, God has the master plan.
Yeah.
I wake up the next morning, walk outside, and there's some stray dog sitting in my yard looking at me, going, "Hey, need a dog? You can't find the owner of that dog." And you're like, "All right, pal. Here's your bowl. Here's your bed.
Let me
Uh,
tell you something.
make
I, t-
yourself
I,
comfortable."
I told you, Sean, a year ago. I want to say a little bit over. I had a dog that my daughter had gotten for her kids, my grandchildren, and of course it ended up being with me because he was kind of a little bit rambunctious,
Yeah.
and she lived in an apartment. One of those things that. So anyway, he became my dog, and he eventually passed away. I think he had his heart because one day he just was a little bit weird, and the next thing I know, I look for him under the table, and he was dead. He just died.
Well,
So I'm just thinking. But anyway, he was already an older dog, so okay. And time went by, and you know what? And I said, you know what? I'm going to give a rescue pet a home. Because I know I'm on all these Fido finders, and whenever somebody puts out an alert for an animal that's been lost in my area, I keep an eye out for it. And there was one where um, they had like a little white poodle, and they had found it, and they were posting it trying to find the owner. So I called up I texted them, I communicated with them on email. I said, look, if you do not find the owners and you cannot keep her, let me know, I'll take her. And sure enough, about 3 weeks later, they contacted me and they said, look, we have posted signs not only on the computer, we've put up posters in the area. We took her to a vet. She had a chip, but it's not, no information for the chip, and we can't keep her. Do you want her? Yeah, yeah, yeah. She goes, well, she's finished. She was in heat. If you want to come pick her up in a week. I said, perfect. I picked her up, Sean. She's a white poodle. She must have been maybe 2 years old. It took me, she was real sweet girl, real sweet girl. And it took me, I took her to the vet. I said, look, looks like she's well taken care of, but I have other dogs. I need to give her shots just in case, distemper, all that other stuff. Anyway, long story short, it took me about 3 or 4 weeks to finally get her groomed. And all of a sudden I look at her and I'm like, wait a minute. Wait a minute. That little belly, huh? Sure enough. Apparently when she had gotten out, she was impregnated. She had been in heat. So here we go. All right, Marlene. I take to the vet and I'm like, I know it. They take an x-ray, two puppies. But to make a long story short, apparently some type of big dog had impregnated her, and when she went to them to have them, she couldn't birth them. One got stuck on the birth canal and died, and the other one, they had to give her the equivalent of a doggy C-section.
yeah.
So she had one puppy, and that's my male dog, and I kept him, of course. And I have my other. I have like 8 dogs right now. Okay, so that gives you
Wow.
an idea. So when I'm talking to the vet, because I have other female dogs, and my other male dog has already been neutered, so I tell the vet, hey, you know what? It's easier to neuter him than spay all my female dogs. And she goes, well, we usually recommend that you wait till he's a year old, which would have been May, like now May. And I'm thinking, okay, fine, not a problem. My 2 little dogs that are not spayed, I'll just make a long story short. somehow or other in December when one of them was in heat. You know where I'm going with this, right?
Yeah.
That little troublemaker, Bubba, we named him Bubba, got one of my girls
That was
by
your first problem.
God, you know that gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
That thing about a puppy not being able to impregnate. No, that doesn't. No, he impregnated her. I don't know. And I was watching. I was on top. It was like, and she's a cross between like a Chihuahua Rat Terrier. She had six puppies.
You remember how it was when we were teenagers? We always found a way.
I'm telling you, it was like I was thinking, okay, I'm like, oh my god, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, she's a small dog, so I'm hoping because he's like how small. You could tell somehow or other she's a white poodle, and she must have got I think together with a Labrador or something because he's kind of a weird little mix. But I'm thinking, okay, my dog is small, so maybe she'll have maybe just a couple of puppies. Like I'm here like six of them. She had never had puppies. Because I'm really careful about breeding because I'm always thinking there's so many rescues out there that need a home. Six shop,
Oh,
six puppies. So it was like that was just out of that one good deed of the one rescue. I'm telling you, it's like here a year later, I've got 7 extra dogs to go with that first rescue. But anyway, it's a good story in the sense of I take it all in stride. I'm going to keep one of them, and the rest I've already got homes already set up. I've got people that are willing to give them a good home. But I'm telling you, yeah, no good deed goes unpunished, I guess is the moral of this story.
absolutely. Yep.
So anyway, thank you so much again, Sean. It has been wonderful
Oh,
to
thank
interview
you.
you, and I hope you're going to come back and we can talk about other experiences that you've had because I know you've had plenty, and things that happen. I'm sure like me sometimes I'm not that active anymore going out there, but I do get called to consult on a lot of stuff. Just sometimes for help. Sometimes people are like, "What do you think about this?" Or have you heard about
Absolutely.
this?
Yeah.
you know, and we could also talk about a lot of the stuff that I hate to say it is particular. Even here to South Florida, you see a lot of it, which is that dark magic. You
Yeah.
know, which is and all you have to have is eyes in your head, and you'll see signs of it all over the place.
Absolutely.
So,
I'll
so
have it's your turn up. So you'll be on my show next.
yes, my pleasure. Just let me know, okay?
You got it.
Okay, darling. Take care.
God bless you. I love you. You're on the prayer list. You know that.
Thank you.
Talk
Likewise.
to you later. Okie
Bye
doke.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye. Wow. He's a fantastic guest. He really, truly is. Let me tell you something. I'm not kidding. He walks the walk and talks the talk. Sean is the for real thing. I mean, I've interviewed him and he's interviewed me, but what I'm saying is we've talked like off, not when we're recording and he is very sincere. And when he wrote that book about his experiences, I mean, I'm sure that he chose, but there's a lot of experiences that he hasn't written about. And he, I'm not kidding, and he's told me about it. This kind of work is very challenging. A lot of people, for some reason, they see these movies and they think, I don't know how, but that there's some type of glamour because maybe they think they're being called by God to do this work, which yes, there is. And I'm not kidding. Most of the people that I've spoken to that do work in deliverance or exorcisms, initially they're kind of like digging their heels in, like going, no, I don't want to do that. I know. And somehow or other, things just go in that direction where that's the work they end up doing. And but even they, at some point they have to step back from it because yeah, you could say, well, there's a drain on you because physically sometimes you have to drive, you have to go places, you have to do this, you have to do that, where they have to step back to basically get some downtime spiritually, mentally, because there's always that I don't want to say it's not fear, because you don't have that fear. It's not a fear thing, but there's this pressure that whatever is there, sometimes it'll run from somebody that's going to perform some type of intervention. But other times you are subject to attack, like what happened with Sean. Okay, I've had interviews already a couple of times with Bill Bean, who's described the same thing. He'll say, you know, it's a thing. It's the physical demands of going here, going there, and driving here, driving there, and then the spiritual stuff. And we're human beings. People are human beings with human bodies, and so you have to take some time off. And a lot of them get to the point of what Sean is describing, where all of a sudden you want to take a back seat to this type of work, because he's absolutely right. You will have friends and family who, I don't want to say you get isolated in the sense, but they're around, but they're like almost hesitant, like almost like it's something is catching, like, yeah, I know you do that work, but if I hang around you, is something gonna like hitchhike with me? You know, it's almost like something is catching, and it's kind of weird, and sometimes people don't understand it, but it scares them. It scares them. And what he was describing, where, yeah, you have friends and families and they're there and they care, but at the same time they start doing this arm's length kind of stuff. Unless, of course, they ever get into trouble, and I'm sure he's going to get a phone call. Hey, buddy, or hey, so-and-so, cousin, or whatever. Guess what? I need your help. You know, then all of a sudden, yeah, then you become real popular. But people get very scared of it. So even in your regular relationships, it can affect even those relationships, because people think, you know how you hear about guilt by association. It's almost like, I love you, and I care about you, and maybe at some level I admire what you do, but I don't want to get too close to you, because what if something jumps on me? And you know I'm talking on a, it's not a logical kind of mentality, but it's usually driven by precaution and fear. And like he was saying, you get to a point where, you know what, you don't want to always be looking over your shoulder, or especially after what he experienced, that you want to be thinking, you know, am I going to get targeted because whatever, because, and that's one of the things when, well, in the case of Sean, where this is what he specializes in, yeah, sometimes you go out there, you really don't know. Sometimes you know right off the bat, but there's different levels of malevolence. You could go on something that could be very low grade. Maybe it's not that difficult, but you might go out there and you might be coming up against something really dark. Like you said, very ancient, very manipulative, very powerful. Okay? That has a million ways from Sunday of getting you off that case, including attacking you. Okay? And anybody, and that's why a lot of clergy of different denominations, whether they're Catholic priests or ministers or whatever, pastors, they are great when it comes to regular religious counseling or needs or interventions, you know, drug use, domestic violence, crisis in the family, spiritual crisis, you know, doubting, all of that. They're great. But when you start going into that realm of demonic possession or oppression, or even let's not even go with the demonic. Let's just go good old paranormal. Something's happening in my house. They put their brakes on. A lot of them maybe even will do more modern, where a lot of reference to evil or Satan or Lucifer or devil is very like well, it's not real. It's more like a description of the antithesis of good. But in other words, it's not, they don't personify it. It's not as serious. And all of a sudden, yeah, regardless if even before they might have, I don't want to say poo-pooed it, but they back down from it because they do realize that it does, that it exists, that it's real, and that this is not your regular things that you can do battle with. As in, hey, I've got some people that have come to me because their marriage is in crisis, and there's been some type of adultery, and that they can grapple with. Counseling, or drug use, they've got some family member that's got an alcohol problem. Hey, they can deal with that. When you start getting into this, which is strictly, truly spiritual, okay? Which, by the way, if you think about it, you've got a problem with, let's say, marriage, a marriage problem, adultery, whatever. You can go to a therapist, counselor. I mean, same thing with drug addiction. You go to a therapist, you can go to a medical doctor if you need to be, going to detoxify. But when it comes to something spiritual, who else are you going to turn to if not somebody that works supposedly in the spiritual realms, which is clergy? That is, if, let's say, and by this I'm assuming somebody that, let's say, has been attending a church or is part of a parish or something, or whatever. Who is you supposed to go to if you think that you're having this type of problem? And I hate to say it, but that's why you see so many paranormal groups getting calls, and myself included. This has happened to me because people have not gotten help from clergy. They don't. I've had people that have told me that they have asked for a house blessing, but they haven't really told either the priest or anything why they really want the blessing. They just say, oh, can you come and bless the house? Whatever. But they're almost afraid of telling the priest or the clergy the real reason why they want the blessing is because something's been going on. Because it almost changes the relationship between them and they're almost afraid of either one not being believed, or forever I'll be the one person. So they kind of ask for a house blessing, but they won't really state why. And they just got their fingers crossed, hoping, hey, when they come in here and do the blessing, maybe that'll take care of it. Why do you think paranormal groups get calls? Clergy turns them away. And if you think that all the times, and I'm sure 1 million people have heard these stories of all the stories on the programs that they say, oh, I've gone to the minister, I've gone to the priest, and they don't believe me. They do believe you. They tell you they don't believe you, or they make it like, oh, they do believe you. They just don't want to say to you, I believe you, but I don't know how to handle it, or I'm afraid of handling it. Because you're going to say, but wait a minute. You're a spiritual leader. I come to church here. You're telling me that, you maybe preach, and you're telling me, and you're quoting from the Bible. And here I've come to you with maybe a major spiritual crisis. So a lot of times that you'll hear people say, you know what? I didn't get any help from my church. And by this, I've heard it from different denominations. And they kind of didn't, because they didn't believe us. And it's like, no, they did believe you. They'll go, no, they told, they kind of said, they kind of like were looking at us. And don't get me wrong. I understand, especially like in the Catholic, that they have like a checklist of things that they need to cross off. And of course, the first thing they look at is their drug use, mental illness. Absolutely. Of course, you have to go through there. But let's look at it this way. If you've got people that you have some type of relationship, even if it's very loose, that you see them at church and whatever, after a while, you get to know who in your congregation might have a problem. Whatever. That's what you're there for, to minister to humans that are imperfect in either in certain areas or at certain times something happens in their lives, right? And all of a sudden, this person doesn't believe what you're describing, that maybe you've had a hard time coming to the point of coming to them for help. And they kind of try to write it off. Well, are you doing any? Yeah. They try to make you feel like I I I'm listening to you, but I really don't believe, that this is a haunting or this is paranormal. It's like, I don't care. This is their out of it, because they do not want to be honest with you and tell you that they know, maybe even based, number one, because maybe they know that you don't have mental illness or that you're not abusing drugs or anything significant that could alter your perception of reality. And maybe if you describe what's happening there, they kind of get that ting-a-ling-a-ling, like, crap, there is something going on. They're not about to tell you, hey, I do believe you, but I'm scared. I don't know. I don't know if, because what happens to their credibility? Because this person is going to look at him and go, what do you mean? You mean all this time that maybe I've been coming to this church and listening to you? It's all been like what? BS? As long as it was nice and vanilla? When I mean vanilla, I mean vanilla as in, yeah, regular good old problems that human beings have. Then you were good with it? And now who else am I going to go to do this with? The police? No. A psychiatrist? No, there's nothing wrong with me. A therapist? No, this is a spiritual matter. I'm coming to you. And you don't believe me? Or you're telling me that you're scared? That's why paranormal groups get calls. And I've gotten calls like that. I've been on investigations like that. That clergy have either refused to help because of disbelief, or if they've done anything, it's been kind of like lackadaisical, like, yeah, I'm going to give you a blessing in the house quick, and then I'm running out the front door. Okay, I blessed the house. Everything seems good here. Bye. Yeah. And these people are like, huh? Wait a minute. Let me tell you something. Once upon a time, this carried that's that's why a lot of people say, well, it's become more mainstream with the advent of these paranormal reality shows where people are more than willing sometimes to admit to hauntings. Sometimes there is no haunting, but once upon a time, that's why even carried, like, kind of want to say, like, a little bit of a stigma where people didn't want to admit it, that they were having events going on in their house for years sometimes. Some of it pretty dark and horrific. I mean, I've read people that said, yeah, I grew up in this haunted house for 20 years. I was scared. I was a kid and I was having nightmares and it was horrible. And you think, man, why didn't they go for help? Because back then, when I say back then, as in maybe more than 20 years or 15 years, it kind of carried like either something wrong with you, you're lying, I mean, anything. Yeah, it is real. It is real when it's real. Yes, there's a lot of people that have psychiatric problems, that there's nothing supernatural. Yes, there's people that have supernatural experiences because they're doing drugs. Sometimes, no. Sometimes, like what Sean was saying, you could have an addiction problem and it's being compounded by supernatural agencies around you. Okay? And then there's people that are totally saying there's nothing wrong, and maybe they dabbled or something in the wrong place. It could be, and there's nothing wrong with them, and they're right in the middle of something going on in their lives and in their houses that they just cannot grapple with, and they don't understand. And it's a spiritual thing. They come finally after they've gone through all the possibilities of of things that they themselves can't explain. They've called electricians, they've called plumbers, they've called people from the pest control, they and so they come to the one thing that's left, that's paranormal, a haunting, whatever. And then they go to somebody thinking, this is the person I thought I would go to. And come to find out that this person is just as scared as you are, even if supposedly they're well versed in the spiritual. And the point I'm trying to make, coming back to that they understand how when somebody does an intervention, let's say like what Sean is talking about, the Rev is doing, you kind of put a bullseye on yourself, okay, from whatever's there, depending on how malevolent it is, how old it is, how intelligent it is, okay, as far as to derail you and get you out of the way. I mean, I'm sure you heard, and And like I said, if you want to read the book, it's a great book. I've been showing a copy of it. I'm going to have a link uh, to his website on the credits of the show, and of course, um, uh, you can look him up. He's also he's in, and he mentions it also on his radio show on KCOR Radio, kcorradio.com. Like I said, it's on Mondays, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every week. He talks on there, and he's got a lot of interesting guests. But believe me, he's not everybody is willing to dabble consistently in this and respond to a call, and you find out that it's everything the person told you and more. Because you're always hoping, especially when you do it like he does, that you're going to get there and either one, there is nothing there, or like he said, it's just Uncle Joe up in the attic stomping around, and maybe somebody needs to have a conversation with Uncle Joe and move him on. Then to what he described, which by the way, it's exactly what he describes in the introduction of the book. It just grips you. That one story that it opens with, as far as how good the book is. So I urge you to get it. It's a very, very good read, and it's very well written. And I guess besides being a good read, if you're into the paranormal and you like to read these stories, it's the reality of either working in this field, because there's a lot of people that say, "Oh, I'm gonna do that." The reality of it, or people that dabble in stuff thinking, nothing's gonna happen. Yeah, that always happens to the other guy. Oh, that's exaggerated. No, stuff like that can happen, and it's very intrusive. And like we were talking about, your life, even after you have an intervention from somebody like Sean, your life will never be the same again. Your life will always be marked before and after this event. Even if there's a complete exorcism, even if there's a total deliverance, even if you move on and you will never ever be the same again. You will never be the person you were before. Your life will never be the same as it was again. I don't care what anybody says. And that is the reality of it. And this is like a cautionary tale for people that sometimes want to dabble in dark things, not knowing what really entails or what can come with it, or what you're actually inviting, even though you think you're not putting out an invitation. I'm not an alarmist. But you can't say you believe in the paranormal, but then poo-poo the darker side of the consequences of getting involved in stuff without realizing how life-changing it could be for the worse. Okay? Because and I've said it before, even when you call in Sean, he's going to pack up his stuff and he's going to go home. You're the one that has to stay living in that house or in these conditions. Even after deliverance, you're the one that has to stay there and deal with it. And believe me, it's not like the movies where hocus pocus, it's over, it's gone. Yeah, sometimes the heavy lifting has been done for you, but you still got residual stuff that you got to deal with. You still got to deal with evil, because I'm going to use that word, trying to creep back in. Somehow, or to find a little chink in your armor to creep back in. And sometimes the most devious ways. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the show. I've got a lot of interesting guests coming on. Like I said, I'm hoping to bring Sean back on so that we could discuss some other interesting stuff, especially those things with the animals. As you can tell, we're both into animals. If you have any true stories, please submit them to me at MiamiGhostChronicles.com, where you can also find links to either the shows on YouTube or the podcast files, or direct links to the podcast platforms. Okay, if you find us, whether it's on YouTube or any of these platforms, make sure to like, subscribe, or somehow or other, so that you get notified when I release new shows. And if you follow me on any of social media, again, I put out there links to the new shows when they're released. Sometimes I'll re-release links to older shows just because sometimes people miss them. and I also put up notices either when I put up a new book or who's a new guest that's coming on. Sometimes I have also on the social media about giveaways. Um, Sometimes I have gotten contacted by different shows that are looking for participants, like for different paranormal shows that they need like a certain type of they're looking if somebody has this type of story. Sometimes I do get contacted by them, and I'll put stuff up on my website, but I'll announce it on social media. So if you can find me Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, any of those places. You could make sure that way, if that's what you're interested in, whatever I get that information, I share it, and then you take it from there. And my True Believer stories, I have the new series, which is Supernatural Storytime, supernaturalstorytime.com. And these are stories about stuff people have sent me throughout the years. And then I've got nightshadediary.com. That's all about classic ghost stories. That there's, God, so many good ones out there. So depending on what you like, what you're into, I hope that you visit. But again, I want to thank you so much for being part of my audience and for spending this time with me. Take care.